I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every individual episode, along with every movie, special, and other piece of media I can get my hands on. These reviews are uploaded as individual episodes here on my channel's Shorts tab, but if you want the extra content, you're gonna have to watch the full Saga coverages I do at the end of every major collection of story arcs. And this video you're watching is one of those, so hello and welcome to the full Saga coverage of Sky Island. Just as an overview of what all additionally will be covered in this video, at the end of each arc that a new devil fruit is introduced, I'll be adding it to this handy dandy tier list. I know there's not a lot of new ones this time around, but luckily there are 2 movies and 2 TV specials to help fill the gaps. I'm also gonna occasionally pop in every once in a while for other purposes. If you're new to this channel and these videos, you might want to familiarize yourself with the previous 2 Saga coverages I've done on the East Blue and Alabasta sagas. That way you can get all the running jokes that I make. Otherwise, feel free to make yourself at home, grab a cup of distilled cloud juice, and enjoy as we start off with some admittedly pretty meh filler arcs. Goat Island plus Rainbow Mist. I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode. Episode 136. This is the start of the second of the 3 filler arcs following Alabasta, Goat Island. I didn't know this arc was coming because my episode guide that I used for Alabasta didn't get this far, which means we're also in the start of the next saga. And what a better way to start than an old man surrounded by goats? I'm not gonna lie though, these goats are hella cute. Gaimon referenced, top tier episode confirmed. I guess word must travel fast in the marine world because this random captain in the middle of nowhere knows that Smoker's not the one that beat Crocodile. I'm also very afraid that the next few episodes are just gonna be the Straw Hats placating this old man until he croaks. It's a funny joke once or twice, but I don't think I can handle it for multiple episodes in a row. No matter what happens, I just know I'm only gonna get upset with it if they mention Warship Island. Episode 137. I know this just means they added an episode recently, but the fact that this is new next to episode 137 is kind of funny to me. I appreciate the detail that Zoro's so good at axemanship that he can turn a tree into 2x4s. I never took Nami for the betting type, but it makes total sense that she would gamble away all their possessions to an old man. I'm not gonna lie, the old man being a moneylender instead of a pirate is hilarious. You've either gotta be really brave or really stupid to lend money to pirates, and Zeddy's probably both. Zenny is a smart man though. Not only has he planned ahead for his own death, he also conned the Straw Hats into helping him for 3 days by not dying. Okay, that doesn't have much to do with his intelligence, but he still did it. Episode 138. With everything he gets up to this episode, I guess you could say Zenny is the goat. Slamming Zenny's makeshift ship up against a marine ship has gotta be the dumbest thing that Luffy's ever done. That is a hodgepodge ship put together by a bunch of amateurs. No professional shipwrights were involved at all. It's a miracle it didn't fall apart. Ah, Chopper put the bandages on her hair and on Zoro's hair. That's gonna hurt like hell to pull off. Leave it to Luffy to outwit an entire fleet of marines by pure accident. If the goats ate Zenny's treasure, I guess that means the real treasure was the friends we made along the way. And I sympathize with Nami because I wanted it to be money too. Episode 139. This guy acts exactly like a time traveler would and even says everything is going exactly as the flow of history demands, so we're getting time travel in this for sure. This filler arc is based around the books that Robin's been reading for the past few filler arcs called the Rainbow Mist, which I have to admit is actually a really clever bit of foreshadowing. And it definitely confirms to me that time travel is gonna happen. I don't know how, but it will. This personal generator gag is hilarious. Otherwise, nothing really big happens in this episode that would let me make a judgment call as to whether or not this is gonna be a good filler arc. I know I mentioned Warship Island every filler arc, but it seriously just has to clear that incredibly low bar. Episode 140. Inside the Rainbow Mist, Science Guy's friends haven't aged a day in 50 years. And this kid uses flick attacks like that marine, that he shares a lot of design similarities with, and also happens to be the one that mentioned the flow of history last episode. So I 100% guarantee that all these kids that got stuck in the Rainbow Mist are gonna pop out back in time. Which means Science Guy here was friendless for 50 years for no reason. It is really funny that this dude's willing to take a random coin that was lobbed at him violently as tax money. You know what they say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, and when life hurls a coin at you with deadly force, pay taxes with it. Episode 141. Me realizing that the Wii is almost 20 years old. These interactions Nami, Sanji, and Chopper have with Merowettin are actually pretty funny. But I also like how instead of drawing in between frames, they just motion blurred the final frame for Sanji, Nami, and Chopper. So if what goes around comes around in Ape's concert, theoretically someone like Luffy who can stretch could reach around far enough to shake his own hand. The Sea King escaping Ape's concert means our heroes are gonna find a way to escape too, so I'm just curious how those kids end up traveling back in time. If I'm wrong about there being time travel, I'll eat Gary. That's how confident I am. Episode 142. I've got to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of this arc, but I'll be damned if some of these moments aren't hilarious. Like the important safety measure just being a rope, or Nami stopping for treasure before finding everyone, and then acting like she's willing to let a kid die to keep it. Okay, this episode's highlights are mostly Nami for me, but gosh darn is she funny, this one. Yo, Dune 2 looks great. I know they popped out in the present day, but I refuse to believe that this child won't be popped 50 years into the past. Robin even directly calls out that time is fucky inside Abe's concert, so there's 100% going to be time travel. I feel like a conspiracy theorist every time I say it, but the writer in me knows it's true. Episode 143. Now that we're at the end of it, I think it's a good time to sum up my thoughts on the Rainbow Mist arc. The plot is nonsensical, even by One Piece standards, and I'm not really that big of a fan of it, but the humor is incredible. It feels like so much thought went into making the jokes that not a lot of thought was put into anything else. Well, they did also do really good at foreshadowing the time travel plot, but like anyone who knows the basics of writing could have figured that out. It's definitely not the worst filler arc, but I actually kind of liked Goat Island a little better. But Goat Island didn't have an Igaram cameo, so you know. Could you imagine if the series was just cancelled after this episode? And this is the last shot we ever got of One Piece. Rest in peace, Straw Hat Pirates. I can't wait to see how you survive this one next episode. Wow, those were something, weren't they? How wonderful of Toei to bless us with those characters that I'm sure we're all definitely going to remember in 2 days' time. Jokes aside, Goat Island and Ruluka Island both weren't spectacular individually and certainly dragged on when combined into one unholy chunk of anime-only material, but combined they take up the same runtime as Little Garden did, so it's really not that big of a deal in the end. I will also give props to Goat Island for not including a child sidekick. I'm gonna go deeper into my thoughts with larger arcs this video than I have in previous videos, but there's just not much for me to talk about with these two. No new devil fruits were introduced in either arc, so that means we can move on to One Piece the movie, Dead End Adventure. In all technicality, I should be covering this 3 episodes into the next arc, but that would major fuck up the vibe of Jaya, so instead we get to talk about Dead End Adventure here and now. One Piece the movie, Dead End Adventure is the 4th theatrical film produced by Toei, the first One Piece movie to be released independent of a special Toei event, and the final One Piece movie to be transferred to 35mm film. It's also the longest One Piece movie so far, at a full 95 minutes compared to the previous 3's 55-minute runtimes. I feel like I've been doing a disservice to the movies and specials so far by not going as in-depth with my reviews as I could, so starting here, I'm going to structure these bonus reviews a little differently. Let's start with a simple summary of the film. I'm going to be skipping over a lot of detail, so you should watch the actual movies if you can find a copy of it. The movie starts, as all great anime-only material does, with the Straw Hats being pursued by a group of Marines captained by this guy, Drake. Keep him in mind for a while later down the line. Nami, being the world's greatest navigator, is able to guide the Going Merry through a storm to a safe port in Hannibal, helped by the fact that Drake gets a call from HQ concerning him with bigger fish. That fish being a suspiciously large gathering of high bounty pirates, namely a marine trader named Gaspard. While on Hannibal, Nami points out that the Straw Hats are flat broke and asks the bartender about earning money after a mysterious guy flashes 200 berries and gets let into a secret entrance. Side note, whoever animated these shots was 100% horny, which makes this screenshot where the bartender calls the Straw Hats just kids very funny. The Get Rich Quick scheme turns out to be a biannual race to a random port with a prize of 300 million berries. Among the contestants are 2 giants, a fishman named Willie who allegedly rivaled Arlong, and a whole ton of nameless fodder pirates. Luffy manages to piss off all of the nameless fodder pirates by stealing their food, and it turns out among them is a bounty hunter named Schreier. Schreier and Luffy keep trying to fight, only to be interrupted by the fodder pirates, and then eventually Gaspard himself, who offers both of them a spot on his crew for their tenacity in beating up so many of his men. Meanwhile, aboard Gaspard's ship, the obligatory filler arc child, a young boy, is affectionately referred to as Badger by his grandpa, as the two work on maintaining the steamboat's boiler. The grandpa is unfortunately sick, and Gaspard's men refuse to treat him, claiming he isn't a part of their crew. As a result, Badger steals a gun and runs off to find the dumbest pirate he can kill to claim their bounty and pay for the medicine. Needless to say, he winds up on the Going Merry. The next morning, the race finally starts, and we find out why it's only held every 2 years, when the winds blow so hard that they push all of the entrance ship up the island's mountain. and over the island's mountain's cliff. A decent chunk of the competition is wiped out, and the Mary herself almost suffers the same fate, only saved by Luffy and Robin. And I know I say this every time Robin uses her powers, but I would collapse as though I had come face to face with an eldritch entity if I saw this in real life. Although they survive, even taking out a couple competitors themselves, the Straw Hats are in last place. This benefits them though, because it turns out Gaspard has set a trap in coordination with the race's bookie, and has led all of the other competitors to a marine base called Neverone that you should also keep in mind for later. later. Oh, and the Straw Hats have undergone the process of befriending Badger because they're just cool like that. Escaping the Marine base before even entering it, the Straw Hats eventually find Gaspard, but only after Schreier almost blows up the boiler and defeats Gaspard's right-hand man / bodyguard / their relationship isn't entirely clear, but he's definitely a subordinate. Luffy then challenges Gaspard and has to knock Schreier out to do so. Gaspard is a tough fighter because he too has eaten a devil fruit, a Logia-type fruit that allows him to turn his body into candy syrup called the Ame Ame no Mi. Thank goodness I stuck with calling Honey Queen's devil fruit the Goo Goo fruit and not the syrup fruit. Luffy almost commits a cannibalism, and Badger's grandpa decides that he wants to blow up the boiler but doesn't want it to go out alone. So... oh, he's just fucking dead. Leaving Luffy and Gaspard left to fight on a sinking ship with an approaching cyclone. Luffy wins using the power of Sanji's cooking tips and is in turn saved by the not actually dead old man. Oh, and Badger is actually Schreier's long-thought dead sister that the old man saved and adopted when Gaspard burned down Schreier's town and stole the steamboat. And everyone lived happily ever after, except for the Straw Hats who didn't win the race because Drake was waiting for them at the final port. One thing I want to point out with the One Piece movies, at least these early ones, the Straw Hats aren't allowed to grow or change as characters. That leaves an interesting problem. How do you write a movie where the characters aren't allowed to have a proper arc? The answer is simple. Just add new ones that can. In One Piece the movie, it was the Odin Kid. In Clockwork Island Adventure, it was the Thief Brothers. In Chopper's Kingdom, it was Mobambi. And in Dead End Adventure, it's Schreier and Badger. So we're gonna analyze them, starting with Schreier and his incredible drip. Schreier starts off as a very mysterious character. We even spend most of the movie wondering how strong he actually is, since his fight with Luffy gets cut short before it can even begin. When he actually joined Gaspard's crew, I was left wondering why, since he seemed to be closer to Zoro in characterization until that point. And he isn't on screen as much as his sister, so his machinations of revenge against Gaspard are left stewing in the background right up until the climax begins and he fights Needless, who I thought was named Needles right up until I spell checked his name. The fight against Needless is very raw. Neither have devil fruit powers or even very high durability, so they're constantly hurting each other in visceral ways. Schreier starts the fight by breaking Needless's arm with a shovel. Schreier also shows himself to not just be a strong fighter, but an intelligent fighter. In both of his big action sequences, he uses his environment to his advantage to deal significant blows to his opponents. Honestly, I would have loved to see more of Schreier throughout the movie, but because he was stuck on the enemy ship, his arc wasn't as fleshed out as it could be until he was reunited with Badger. By the way, Badger's real name is Adele, but I'm going to keep calling her Badger for a bit because that's what I wrote down in all my notes. Speaking of Badger, her arc is very formulaic. I don't like pirates because they did insert horrible thing and killed insert family member. But then I met the Straw Hats and they were friendly and helped me, and now I'm less upset at their existence. It's the same flavor of supporting character that's been around since the 1998 OVA, and frankly, I just want something new. What sets Badger apart though is her relationship with the old man. The two aren't related by blood, but since the old man raised her, Badger treats him like family, and getting medicine for him is her whole motivation. Quick side note, her character design is meant to mislead you into thinking she's a boy until Schreier reveals his backstory to the old man, which is why I referred to her with masculine pronouns in the summary section. As individuals, Schreier and Adele's arcs are nothing burgers, but when they reunite at the end of the movie, everything kind of just clicks together. Schreier was so consumed by revenge for his sister and home that he's done unspeakable things that he can't forgive himself for, and Adele has only had the old man looking after her since she was 3. In the 8 years they spent apart, Schreier was left to steep in his resentment, while Adele only had one positive force in her life. So when the two are finally reunited, they don't have an immediate moment of connection, and they both keep distant for their own reasons. I absolutely love that what brings them together isn't some BS about the bonds they had as children, but the old man once again stepping in to be a positive force and encouraging them to reconnect. But no story is complete without its antagonist, and Dead End Adventure is no exception. Gaspard is a malicious, cruel, and sadistic man, tripling the race's prize money to lure in more contestants and then sending them all to their dooms. Even the bookie who helped coordinate the betrayal is himself betrayed and sent to a watery grave. And why does Gaspard do it? He has no greater ambition. There's no money-making scheme. He just wants to toy with people and use their suffering for his pleasure. He even goes out of his way to trash Luffy's hat just to mess with him. His cruelty and abilities garnered him a bounty of 95 million berries, just 5 million berries short of Luffy, who's currently unaware of his new bounty at this point in the story. This isn't a concern of Luffy's though, as other than remarking about said bounty being higher than Crocodile's, he fights Gaspard because he thinks Gaspard is an asshole, which is a classic Luffy motive perfectly in line with his character. I also want to point out that Gaspard's weakness is flour, since it nullifies his stickiness and leaves him vulnerable in his liquid form. Meanwhile, Crocodile's weakness is wet things, say something like a sticky syrup. What I'm trying to say is that if Gaspard and Crocodile were to fight, they would be stuck in an endless stalemate, with Gaspard having a slight advantage due to his powers not being completely nullified and his ability to make spikes, which puts Gaspard right above Crocodile in S tier. One more thing that you'll probably notice about Dead End Adventure is the large amount of CGI integrated into the animation. A lot of environments, especially in the opening of the film, are rendered in 3D with 2D characters composited on top. The Going Merry is also 3D, and almost all of the shots of its exterior. The compositing is fairly typical for 2003. It's not great, but also not eye-breakingly bad. The biggest attractor is the strangely smooth camera animation. The opening is animated like the POV of someone riding a theme park coaster through Hannibal. The atmosphere of the art is also a lot moodier than the previous 3 films, which complements the subject matter of the film and Gaspard's cruelty as a villain. And honestly, I like it a lot more than the excessive rim lighting that was present in Chopper's Kingdom on the Island of Strange Animals. There's also a small amount of reused animation, mostly relegated to flashbacks of Shanks and young Luffy, but also this shot is ripped straight from Warship Island and the introduction to the Calm Belt. So the movie does have to lose points for reminding me of Appy's existence. To round this segment out, I went frame by frame through this hallway of wanted posters from the beginning of the movie to see if there was anything notable. A lot of them ended up being reused assets, so Easter eggs include Eldorado, Golast, and Wunan from One Piece the movie, Panda Man, multiple wanted posters from Full Body's Bounty Wall that reference Oda's pre-One Piece works. This is also the source Velveeta's and Kuro's wanted posters, Wetten from Ruluka Island, and Nico Robin, both of which are discolored from age, Bojack, Honey Queen, and Bear King from Clockwork Island. The other Trump siblings are probably in there too, but it's hard to make some of these out. I'm literally editing this as we speak, and I just found Skunk 1, Battler, Hot Dog, and Hebe from Chopper's Kingdom, Buggy the Clown, and Arlong, Galley from the Romance Dawn one-shot that we'll talk about in a few months, multiple competitors from the Dead End race, including AAA, Bigelow, Willie, and Needless multiple times. Obviously, there's Luffy at the end, but most notably, Don Krieg appears 3 times, more than any other East Blue pirate. It makes sense. No other East Blue pirate is strong enough to last a whole week in the Grand Line and escape back home. My recommendation, if you can find a good place to watch it, One Piece the movie Dead End Adventure is a must-watch for any One Piece fan. It has great action, great humor, great animation, good enough characters, and is the most film-like One Piece movie so far in my watch-through. Jaya. I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode. Episode 144. So ships just fall from the sky now. Not only that, a ship from the South Blue. How the hell did a ship from the South Blue end up in an island in the sky? And also, how the hell is there an island in the sky? Why, of all people, did they send Luffy on the dredging mission? He can't swim. I'm really 50-50 on the gorilla guy and his crew, because on one hand, monkey. But on the other hand, as Luffy puts it, he's a gorilla in makeup. I like seeing Robin's archaeology skills putting this corpse back together, and I also really like that she's the most knowledgeable of all the Straw Hats of how the Grand Line works, because she has been sailing on it for longer than any of them. Oh yeah, and we're out of the filler arcs now, so this is all canon. Episode 145. I wholeheartedly love the integration of terrible early 2000s CGI. It's so awful in such a fun way. But also, these angels must be huge if it's terrifying the entirety of the Straw Hats, because these guys literally eat Sea Kings for breakfast. That's funny, it looks like they pulled up an octopus with all their treasure. I wonder if anything's gonna happen to it. Oh, the devil works fast, but Sanji works faster. That was a quick turnaround on that takoyaki. I completely forgot that Buggy didn't actually get imprisoned by the Marines after he got caught in Logtown, so it's kind of a surprise to see him here. And speaking of surprises, everyone's favorite fucked up greasy rat is back. I mean that in the most endearing way possible, because I love Ace. I'm gonna be honest, Gorilla Guy got done dirty this episode. Like, you didn't have to do that to him. Gorilla Guy was so kind to them last episode. He deserves better. Episode 146. So Jaya is a port that caters to pirates, which means it's full of all sorts of weirdos. But my favorite weirdo is definitely Cherry Pie Guy. The way he and Luffy just bounce off one another is great. I'm also really interested in this Bellamy guy, especially with his behavior and speech at the end of the episode. He seems to be kind of the closest to an anti-Luffy that we've gotten so far. There's also a lot of mention of bounties, like Bellamy has a $55 million bounty, Luffy has his $30 million bounty, that's actually $100 million. This guy from the opening is mentioned to have a high bounty, so I guess that bounties are just the pirate equivalent of a power level. Makes sense, power scalers need something to go off of. Episode 147. Oh my gosh, I love this sequence where Luffy and Zoro are letting themselves get beat on. That sounds a little sadistic, but it's a perfect callback to Shanks at the beginning of the series. I also really like Cherry Pie Guy and how he just kind of gets the vibe. I am certain that this is not the last we'll see of Cherry Pie Guy, because he reminds me so much of Luffy. And the way that Luffy just stands there wordlessly while he shouts on about the same things that Luffy would talk about gives him such a menacing aura. If there's one thing One Piece correlates, it's dreaming and strength. And this guy is one of the biggest dreamers in the series so far, even in just this slight amount we've seen him. Also, I love this new Robin outfit. Oh, and I'm a One Punch Man fan, so I can't see these guys without thinking of Black Sperm. One Piece is so good at making character designs that I love to hate. But that says more about me than their character designs. Episode 148. I love how fond Usopp is of the Going Merry, even if it annoys the rest of the crew. Sanji saying he's from the North Blue suddenly has me questioning so many elements of his backstory that I just took for granted previously. How did he get from the North Blue to the East Blue? Why was he working on a cruise ship as a child? What happened to his biological parents? I know the answer is probably just that they were killed in the same storm that took Zeph's leg, but it's crazy how one little bit of information can change so much. I really like this this Mont Blanc cricket guy and how his motivation is more complex than just wanting to clear the Mont Blanc family name after Noland. It's nice to have supporting characters with depth, but man, is he built like a thumb. I do wonder how the City of Gold and the Sky Island are connected, because they've gotta be connected. Maybe the Sky Islanders sunk the City of Gold out of spite or jealousy. It's too early on to tell anything, so I'm just gonna be spouting crackpot conspiracies. Episode 149. Let me get this straight. The plan is to shoot the Mary into the air on a highly volatile underwater geyser? You know what? I can't think of a better way to do it. May as well try this one. And the whole plan hinges on finding this bird that's actively trying to kill everyone in the woods. I don't know why I'm acting so exasperated. This is actually really fun to watch. I find it hilarious that the one thing Usopp isn't afraid of is bugs. My man put on an extreme display of cowardice earlier, only to be like, oh yeah, spiders. I love spiders. Spiders are great. And that's why Usopp remains my favorite member of the crew. Episode 150. Yo, screw Bellamy. All my homies hate Bellamy. What he and his crew did to the Monkey Brothers and Cricket is unforgivable. But man, do Cricket's final words in the confrontation about not being a true pirate if you're not willing to follow your dreams ring hard. I love how the animation perfectly captured that man realizing that he fucked up. I love that Luffy's plan to get to Mocktown is to just run around the entire island. I mean, at least he's not gonna get lost like Zoro would. Poor Bellamy going out so confident, not realizing he's gonna get his ass kicked in by a guy whose name is Monkey. That's the connecting thread. Bellamy beat up the Monkey Brothers, so now Monkey D. Luffy's gonna beat him up. It all comes full circle. Episode 151. To start off, Luffy kicking Bellamy's ass with one punch. Perfect. The D in Luffy's name may as well stand for Dreamer, because that's where he gets his power from, and Bellamy was talking mad shit on Dreams, so it makes sense that Luffy take him out so easily. But also, a lot of stuff that feels like it's gonna be important later on happens this episode, like the reveal of the head of the government being 5 old dudes. And also 2 more Warlords of the Sea, Don Quixote do Flamingo, and Bartholomew Kuma. Mihawk wears a cross, and Bartholomew here is reading out of the Bible. So does that mean Jesus exists in One Piece? Oh my god. Why is this guy's name Whitebeard? He doesn't have a beard, he has a mustache. Oh, and Cherry Pie Guy is Blackbeard, because that's how you introduce a major threat. By feeding him cherry pie. Blackbeard is so strong that Shanks is risking government intervention to go talk with Whitebeard about him, and he's just casually hanging out on Jaya. But hey, if he's on Jaya, that means Ace might show up again, and that's always fun. Episode 152. Oh my god, what did they do to the Mary? They turned her into a chicken! Blackbeard's ship being 4 big logs strapped together is hilarious. Talk about function over form. I love that Sanji's reaction to finding out about Zoro and Luffy's bounties is to ask if he had one too. Top 10 Usopp face. Zoro just casually standing on the door is also really funny. I really like the suspenseful buildup with how dangerous the whirlpool is, especially because they literally show a Sea King drown in it. And the first opening playing when they start to fly is just Chef's Kiss. If you count filler, we've now had land, sea, and sky pirates, which completes the trifecta. I'm gonna get this out of the way right off the bat. Bellamy's Spring Fruit is A tier. Springy Legs can be used in a lot of different ways, mostly maneuverability, but if Bellamy weren't so hellbent on jumping around, he could have easily used it to beef up his kicks instead of his punches. As for the Jaya arc overall, I think it's highly representative of One Piece's core themes and ideals. Bellamy is a great antagonist because although he stands in direct opposition to Luffy's beliefs, both still believe in some amount of freedom. In Luffy's case, it's freedom from the oppressive regimes he regularly topples, but in Bellamy's case, he acts as though he should be free of all consequences simply because he's strong. As such, Bellamy treats others with disrespect and acts as though anyone who doesn't follow his pessimistic belief system is worthless. It is a bold statement to have a character so opposite of the protagonist, one that gets told at every step that he isn't even worthy of being called a pirate, only to scoff and keep going, and then have Luffy decimate him in a single punch. And that's not even getting into Blackbeard's introduction, or Cherry Pie Guy, as I like to call him. A lot of media will hype up a big bad on their introduction by having them do something memorable and devastating. You see, the Wharf effect. Blackbeard got a lot of hype last saga due to his antics in Drum Kingdom and his pursuit by Ace, so expectations are massively subverted when he finally gets put to page proper as just some schmuck in a random bar. I pointed out how enamored I was with his scenes that followed in my actual episode reviews, so I'm not gonna bring that up again, but I do want to say that even before his identity was revealed, he struck me as an important character, but I only thought he was going to wind up as this saga's crocodile in terms of character importance. Blackbeard's literary identity as a foil to Luffy is perfectly put on display even in just the short interactions the two have. They both have a lot in common, yet the bar shows that they're complete opposites in their own ways. Even after his introduction with the argument over cherry pie versus steak, we can see how this extends to other details of the two's personalities. Luffy surrounds himself with strong but ultimately selfish selfless weirdos, while Blackbeard surrounds himself with strong weirdos who go around picking fights. Luffy has a great fondness for the Going Merry, and especially her decoration. Blackbeard, on the other hand, sails on something that can technically be described as a ship, something built for bare-bones utility and nothing else. I'm gonna rapid fire through the rest of the details that I like. Cricket's motivation being a tussle with destiny rather than some long-standing family goal to clear Nolan's name feels like it could be an important recurring theme, and I'm gonna keep it in the back of my head for now while watching the rest of the show. The Monkey Brothers are great after you get used to them. I enjoy their presence and how each has lung capacity related abilities that has nothing to do with their appearance. I seriously can't get over how much Cricket looks like one of the thumbs from Spy Kids. Blackbeard's sniper guy is a terrifyingly accurate shot. Bartholomew Kuma's Bible isn't necessarily the Bible, and crucifixion isn't necessarily religious, so Mihawk's cross doesn't have to mean anything, but it's when you combine the two that things get funky. 2003 CGI turtle, my beloved.
Upon the Great Sea, a father's huge dream
is the second One Piece special episode following Adventure in the Ocean's Navel. This episode seemingly takes place before the Jaya arc. And it technically aired smack dab in the middle of it, between episodes 149 and 150, but to break things up properly, I'm covering it here and now. The basics of the plot are as follows.
3 children are being transported by a group of pirates, but under the promise of receiving treasure, 2 of the pirates double kidnap the children and escape to a mysterious island. By chance, the Straw Hats also happen upon the island, despite their log posts not even pointing at it. The 3 children and the 2 pirates play family and pretend that they're only there on vacation, but the Straw Hats catch on pretty quickly. Luffy was also drugged by Sanji, so he's hella sleepy, and manages to sling himself over to the ship of the first group of pirates who have finally located the island after searching for the children for a month. The bad pirates take Luffy and the oldest of the 3 children, Amanda, to the head ship of their fleet, a music-themed ship captained by Bayan. Bayan gets annoyed that Luffy is eating too much and hypnotizes him with the power of music, something consistent with Chopper's kingdom on the island of strange animals. While Luffy is immobilized, Bayan also uses the power of hypnosis to make Amanda remove her shirt. I don't want to see this. It's slightly less creepy than it sounds because he's only after the treasure map that Amanda has tattooed on her back. Still hella creepy though. The Bayan pirates return to the island in search of its treasure, and the Straw Hats, who have made friends with the other children and the 2 pirate defectors at this point, are forced to fight Luffy. Usopp long-range drugs an entire choir, which ends Luffy's hypnosis, and all the Straw Hats gang up to do what I can only describe as a Power Rangers-esque team attack against Bayan. Oh, and then they pose like the Power Rangers too. The Straw Hats decide to help dig up the treasure with the promise of getting a small share of it, but after following the map, it's revealed that the strange island the treasure was hidden on is actually a giant oyster, and the treasure was a massive pearl. Much to Nami's disappointment, because if there's only one piece of treasure, she isn't allowed to claim any of it. But in the end, everyone lives happily ever, cut to black.
There's a pretty significant and obvious difference in the approach between special episodes 1 and 2. Adventure in the Ocean's Navel was much more action-driven, with a focus on the incredibly moody atmosphere the Ocean's Navel provided. Meanwhile, other than a child being forced to remove her shirt, a father's huge dream is much more lighthearted. This is especially noticeable in the way that the characters interact. The pirate defectors, Bonnie and Max, aren't aggressive to the Straw Hats at all, and the only one of the children to even be moody is Amanda, and that's even only after she was re-kidnapped. I especially love Chopper's interactions with the youngest child, and how everyone is appreciative of Sanji's cooking when they end up eating together. Quick side note, I'm a big fan of Bonnie and Max's designs, but something feels ever so slightly off about Amanda's design in an uncanny way. Unfortunately though, the villains are just as forgettable as Captain Joke was, except even more so this time around because Joke was at least super menacing and well animated at the start of Adventure in the Ocean's Navel. Bane gets just too many flared sleeves and an ugly haircut. Him being connected to Amanda and the other children's father is also just kind of shoehorned in as a convenient way to chauffeur Luffy and Amanda back to the giant oyster. That being said, between Huge Dream and Ocean's Navel, I think I prefer Huge Dream. They're both roughly on par with one another in terms of writing, animation, and performances, but Ocean's Navel has a kid running around saying the word Nakama every 5 minutes, whereas Huge Dream only has the word Nakama 4 times. My recommendation, if you can find a copy to watch, it's not the worst way to kill 45 minutes, and there are a few pretty fun moments, but it's not something to go out of your way to watch unless you're doing a project like I am.
Cover stories. Hey folks, we're going to be taking a brief intermission from the Sky Island Saga to cover a topic that I've been asked about a few times now, in the style of a segment that I'm definitely not ripping off from Quentin Reviews. I was planning on covering the cover stories eventually, but my initial plan was to just do a big lump of them at the end of either this saga or the next. But the thought of covering Oda's SBS answers had completely escaped my mind until a few commenters mentioned it under the Alabasta Saga video. So shout out to Mr. Peanut Butter and Roku Dodo Maza. Let's start with cover stories from the East Blue Saga, or should I say cover story from the East Blue Saga. 2 cover stories were started during the East Blue Saga, but the second one released the majority of its chapters during the Alabasta Saga, so we're gonna hold on to that for a bit. As for what cover stories actually are, if
if you're a fan that reads the manga or a long-standing fan, you're probably familiar with them. Cover stories are, well, exactly what the name implies. Stories that take place exclusively on the covers of a new chapter's release. A few of them actually have been adapted into episodes, like the very first one. Buggy's Crew Adventure Chronicles starts on the cover of chapter 35, and tells a story of what happens to Buggy following the events at Orangetown. This was also adapted into 2 episodes of the anime at the start of Logtown, so everyone should be at least somewhat familiar with them. In lieu of dialogue in panel, cover stories deliver their words in a caption at the bottom. For Buggy's Crew Adventures, it goes as follows.
Buggy's Crew, After the Battle, Moji and Kawachi, Buggy's Adventure, Buggy and the Big Bird.
I was initially going to show these off on paper to the camera, but I fucked up cutting and my printer fucked up printing, so pinboard.
Battle of Wits, Journey Through the Sky, Part 2, Crash Landing on the Island of Rare Animals, Battle in the Forest of Judgment, You're a Freak too, Farewell to a Worthy Foe, Crab Attack, Enter the Mysterious Lady Pirate.
Quick aside, Chapter 51 would eventually have its cover redrawn by the illustrator for the Dr. Stone manga, Boichi, for the Roronoa Zoro Falls into the Sea one-shot, a part of the One Piece cover comic project, a project in which different mangaka redo One Piece chapters in their own style. So far, 3 have been released, 2 of which were done by Boichi, and the last one being in 2022.
Wanted Man, Pirate Alliance, Oh Captain, We Hold You in Our Hearts, The Duel of Captain Succession, The 12-Hour Bout, Explosion, Sleepwalking Richie, Formation, The Richie Pirate Crew.
The following 2 chapters were renamed to Richie's Crew Adventure Chronicles, following Richie's ascent to captaincy.
The island's indigenous Kumate tribe, The Pulverization of the Richie Crew, I See It, My Pirate Ship, Reunion, That's Bananas, Richie Alvin, Richie and Company, Stewed in Red Wine, Suspicious Parts, Rampaging Parts, Shadows on the Horizon, Sorry for Making You Wait, Boys, Parade, Oh Captain, Our Captain.
Having already seen episodes 46 and 47, comparing them to the actual cover story is actually kind of fun. Like, in the anime, the crab creature that attacks Buggy when he leaves Gaimon is a lot bigger than it is in the manga. But cover stories aren't the only thing in the manga that impacts canon, because starting with Volume 4 of One Piece's release, series creator Eiichiro Oda began answering fan questions in a segment called Shitsumon o Boshu Suru, which roughly translates to I'm taking questions, and is typically shortened to SBS. I'm going to be using the One Piece Wiki's SBS archive. The wiki is a really great archive and has information on pretty much all facets of One Piece, so a big thank you goes out to everyone maintaining it. SBS questions are usually about canon information, character quirks, or little jokes that Oda wants to answer. For instance, the very first and likely most common question based on Oda's answer was how old are the characters? The answer being Luffy and Usopp are 17, Nami is 18, Zoro is 19, and Shanks was 27 10 years ago. There are a lot of questions and answers, so I recommend actually reading through it yourself, but I'm going to share a few of my favorites.
Does the origin of Zoro's last name come from the pirate known as Francois L'Olonnais? That is correct. The name really was taken from the so-called most fierce and cruel pirate, Francois L'Olonnais, of the Caribbean Sea. That name, Morgan, and Alvida are all real names of real pirates.
How come Luffy never feels nervous or intimidated?
It's definitely because he is stupid.
How come Luffy never kills his enemies? Throughout One Piece manga so far, he didn't kill Moji and Helmeppo, but Axe Hand Morgan was killed by Zoro. Why is that?
That's a very good question. First, I have to announce that Morgan is still alive. He's currently in jail, where he was placed by his former subordinates. Why doesn't Luffy kill his enemies? Because in that era, everyone uses their lives to fight for their dreams. For an enemy, when their dream has been shattered, it is the same as losing a fight, and as painful as death. I believe that, as pirates, killing or not killing is secondary to victory or defeat. How many devil fruit are there, and what kind of fruit are they? If you want to know what they are, please just continue reading my manga. How many are there? From the rumors I've heard, there are over 100, and many people with the special abilities are at that place.
Where are you from, Sensei? It wasn't in your Volume 4 profile.
From Kumamoto, from Kyushu, from a wonderful place.
When I went to the barber a little while ago and asked for a Zoro haircut, he shaved my head. What should I say to get a haircut like Zoro's?
Ask for the cut of a man's heart and spirit.
Does Shanks like me?
I don't care.
How many assistants do you have? What do they do?
There are 4. They help me with the backgrounds and so forth. They stay at my house and help me for 3 days and 2 nights a week. But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be able to finish a chapter without them. However, it's such a silly place with all of us together that doing the work is very fun.
Oda-sensei, I thought of a great move. 1. Luffy stretches out his arm. 2. Zoro cuts his arm off. 3. The arm shoots away. Note the move can only be used twice.
Whoa.
Sensei, since Luffy is a human, does that mean his penis stretch too?
His penis can stretch too.
Luffy, what does this stand for? Is it God Free, or maybe Daibutsu, or maybe? I'm really curious. Please tell me.
I've gotten a ridiculous number of these letters. So many. But I cannot answer that question. I can't answer it. Yet. Please just read it as D and don't think too deeply into it, for now.
I went to the barber and told him, a spirit of the man's heart cut. Then he said, okay. And he shaved my head bald. Entirely wrong look. Sensei, are there any requirements to become a Zoro? Tell me. Sob, sob.
Don't cry. Stand up. There are some battles in which a man cannot run from. So what if you got shaved bald once? When your hair grows out again, go back to that barber and challenge him. A return match. Well, if I were you, I wouldn't.
When the Orlon guy and the other fishmen give birth, do they lay eggs like a fish?
Fishmen are still mammals, so they give birth the way humans do. There are fish women too, of course.
There are actually a decent amount of SBS questions that you can't really properly translate, since Oda and readers alike both really enjoy making puns. In the normal localization process, something like puns would be altered to fit the target audience, in my case, someone who speaks English. But the SBS isn't something that you should follow typical localization standards for because it's a Q&A rather than a scripted series. That being said, I actually laughed at a lot more of these than I included. I just realized I was probably adding way too many into the video, so I slowed down towards the end. Also notable, the SBS in Volume 11 is entirely dedicated to the inner workings of the Going Merry. A lot of the canon information given is also about inconsequential things, like how big Nami's boobs are or ranking the characters by IQ, so you aren't missing a ton if you skip the SBS, but it's all definitely worth a read. We'll come back to this segment for the Alabasta cover stories in SBS in a while, but until that happens, you're gonna have to watch another chunk of episodes. At least now we finally made it to
Sky Island Skypiea.
I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode.
Episode 153.
You know, for being such a coward, it sure is brave of Usopp to dive headfirst into the cloud, especially since he ends up falling all the way through. This shot with Robin's eyes on Luffy's arm, it's so cool in a creepy way. I like that the sea monsters in the sky pop like balloons. It makes sense that these things would need unique adaptations, and that Luffy would immediately ask to be able to eat it. Pierre's transformation into the Pegasus is accompanied by the worst cracking noises ever, so this has gotta be painful. And hilarious. Okay, so this is Heaven's Gate. This lady looks like an angel, and she communes with God while the Straw Hats travel to Skypiea. One Piece isn't beating those Jesus allegations.
Episode 154.
I'm glad it didn't take long for the answer of how the hell is there an island in the sky to be given, and part of me is really glad it's just some gobbledygook with sea prism stone, because when you just throw together a bunch of sciencey sounding words, I don't have to think about whether or not they're correct. Nami, you can't go out dressed like that. You're a redhead and there's almost no UV protection up there. Nami's gonna end this arc redder than a lobster. This little bit where Luffy shares his food with Usopp, that's great. I love Luffy and Usopp's brotherly dynamic and how they just feed into each other's funniest attributes. I also really like these dials and how there seems to be one for every occasion. They're a little fun, unique way of having technology in the sky. Also, I'm surprised that we're already getting to the kill God portion of this shonen. Usually killing God is the last thing a shonen protagonist does, and here they are setting up Luffy to do it before episode 200.
Episode 155.
What the hell are those pants? I like all the different reactions the Straw Hats have to finding out that God is real. Zoro being so nonchalant about it, and Luffy being the most surprised, which to be fair, if I'd seen the things that Luffy had seen, I'd be surprised that God is real too. I absolutely love this scene with its limited use of colors and high contrast lighting. It is so impactful. A display of the sheer dominance that God Anaru must have over this island. And I think Nami is right to be terrified by it. This is a whole new tier of power for the series. Like, even Crocodile wasn't this strong. Side note, I love Usopp's little cloud statues, and how Sanji only crushes the men of the crew. So I noticed that the 200-year-old Waver doesn't have pedals, which I wonder if that makes it so Luffy will be able to drive it better. He'll probably still be terrible at driving it, but it's something to think about.
Episode 156.
Oh my god, Luffy looks high in that photo. Usopp is so funny this episode. All of his shenanigans to try to keep them out of trouble backfiring is hilarious. I especially love when everyone just goes down for nap time, and then for everything to just be all for naught when Nami crashes into the head of the White Berets is fucking hilarious. Also, quick side note, I am obsessed with Sky Island fashion. These uniforms are just, I don't know, they're just je ne sais quoi. I really like the detail of the Sky Island weapons using dials to create these little pathways. It's a great weapon for both offense and maneuverability. And also, I want a pair of those cloud skates. If taking out an entire squadron of White Berets is only a second-degree crime, I would hate to see what a first-degree crime is. I guess we'll just have to wait until Luffy kills God to find out.
Episode 157.
I love this little scene where Chopper goes into Heavy Point and then transforms back to Small Point just to get on the ship. That's so cute. Conus 100% betrayed the Straw Hats here. The music that plays during this scene is super ominous, especially compared to the lighthearted theme that kicks in the very next scene, and Kona spends the rest of the episode acting remorseful and sus. A god lobster. I laughed super hard at this scene where Sanji says Nami, Robin, and the others. I can't believe God picked the strongest 3 members of the Straw Hats to go stand trial. They're gonna kick his ass. Usopp controls an army of 8,000 men. Meanwhile, Zoro over here can't even cut his way through a lobster. The Straw Hats on the boat are screwed. I guess I'll just have to sit around and wait for Captain Usopp to save the day. I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode. I love how Usopp's new outfit is just his regular outfit with a shirt and a different headband. I'm also a big fan of how, despite how goofy Luffy is, running around getting into all sorts of shenanigans in the shopping district and annoying his crewmates by doing so, he's still capable of dropping insight that shows he's highly aware of everything around him. Also, I feel really bad for Konis because she only betrayed the Straw Hats out of duress. Also, this bit where everyone gets mad at Konis for telling them the truth because it puts her in danger, it just perfectly captures what I love about these characters. I'm curious about these god beams. Are they more biblical, like a beam of holy energy, or do they lean more towards classical myth, like a lightning bolt? It probably depends on what type of god we're talking about, capital G or lowercase g, but considering the Sky Knight here used to be god, I think we're dealing with a lowercase g. Also, I love Pierre. That silly horsebird is so ugly he loops around into being adorable. Episode 159. I like all the Verth statues that are just kind of scattered around the entrance to the Milky Roads. It gives whoever Verth used to be a real mythological feel. I am genuinely shocked that Zoro has more than one shirt. Also, I love how he prepares for his little Tarzan yell ahead of time, and then tells Nami that she should have done a Tarzan yell too. Also, the way that Robin catches Nami would be so creepy to see in real life. Poor Chopper is so adorable when he realizes there's no one left to protect him. I love how Luffy has a casual understanding of basic physics that he probably developed through just sheer trial and error. Way to go, Luffy. That's intelligent. But what the hell is the point of all these traps on the Milky Road leading to God? Isn't the point of getting them to Heaven's Domain to exercise judgment, not to just murder them? I mean, I guess in that case, murdering them would be executing Heaven's judgment, but come on. Episode 160. I love Robin's little sarcastic remark when the others were confused about what was so special about the dirt on a sky island. This Satori guy mentions he owns all the Verth in this section of the upper yard, so I guess Verth isn't a person so much as a substance. That makes me feel silly in retrospect. Usopp's little imagination bits are also really good, and I like Luffy's logic into picking the ordeal of spheres being that balls are fun. Yo, the Splash Mountain redesign is looking kinda sick. I think Satori's gonna be a pretty interesting fight because all these spheres are filled with different things, and he has the ability to predict opponents' movements. Normally One Piece is really good at ending episodes on good cliffhangers, but this one just kind of randomly ends abruptly. Like, it doesn't even hard cut to it fades to black. I don't think any episode in the middle of a fight has just faded to black. Usually it hard cuts. Episode 161. Satori here has an interesting set of powers. He doesn't know what's in the balls. He can do these strange energy blasts, and he's able to predict his opponent's movements. Which is to say, I have no clue what his power is, but it's probably not a devil fruit. How many times is Luffy gonna get stuck in something and then put his teammates in danger as a consequence? This is at least the second time it's happened. I do love that after Luffy gets freed, he does the same Tarzan yell that Zoro did. And then Usopp following it up with his own Tarzan yell. Only for the belt to not work properly is hilarious. Especially with the play on the when he's going backwards. Top 10 Chopper face. I love Robin and her little sarcastic remarks, like pointing out how everyone's fighting over who's the most pathetic. If she keeps this up, she might just steal the #1 spot on my list of crew favorites. I feel bad for Chopper getting attacked by this guy, but when you put a challenge out into the world, don't be upset when it answers it. At least he had the whistle. Episode 162. I'm not gonna lie, Gonfal's little cottage in the sky, with his own little pumpkin patch, in a nice little secluded area with easy access to the rest of the world is such a life goal. Ugh, Usopp's not gonna be happy about this. This is also like the third time that the mast has been removed from the Mary. They're gonna have to get that professionally fixed soon. Chopper having to face the consequences of the other three running off is so unfair to my little man. Gonfal can do the same energy burst as Satori, so it's probably just like some sort of technique. Also, is it weird to say that this fight kind of reminds me of the game Joust? This is the second episode in a row that this kid has popped up, so they're probably going to be important. I'm kind of curious how this jousting stick is so hot that it can melt metal and start fires. Considering this guy is one of the 4 priests, maybe they all just have a unique ability that doesn't stem from a devil fruit. It would make sense why the only other person we see using their techniques is someone with divine connections, you know, the former god. I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much into things. Episode 163. So this is that Dragon Ball show everyone's talking about. I love that the answer to how do we defeat a guy that can predict our movements is sheer luck. Are we sure Luffy ate the gum gum fruit and not the lucky fruit? So the little girl from the past few episodes is stealing Verth, which is just dirt. It seems to have some importance to these guerrilla fighters. Oh, and these guys are also the enemy of God. We already know that this guy
guy is pretty strong because he's the one from the start of the arc that was blowing up boats, but as to how he stacks up to the priests, who knows? Chopper jumping in the water to save Gonfall is a great example of how knowledge in one area does not necessarily make you the most intelligent person in the world. Chopper, you can't swim. I'ma be honest, Sanji should keep his cooking to the kitchen and not to smack talk. Shout out to Usopp for finding the location of the exit using his brain. He earns the number 2 most intelligent Straw Hat title this episode just for doing that. Episode 164. This episode's another one of them heavy hitters like episode 151 was. There's lots of quick character introductions and the start of some big moments of action, but oh my gosh, is this montage in the last 5 minutes so good. The reveal that the City of Gold is the Sky Island hits so hard, especially with the accompanying visuals and Cricket's speech about destiny being laid over them. Folks, this episode is just incredible. I also love the build up to it with Nami acting like she's lost her mind. It all just hits hard. This is how you do a big lore drop. Echiro Oda and the staff at Toei are straight up goats for this. Episode 165. I love Chopper's everything is fine, nothing happened face. Oh, I love how the group on the Crow are just waiting and waiting for another ordeal to start, completely oblivious to the fact that there's a war going on. Also, this dude calls Luffy's power a paramecia, which I guess must mean something. Zoro comments on this Montara ability being like a sixth sense, so I am 100% confident that he will unlock it, especially because it's pretty similar to what he did during his fight with Mr. One in Alabasta. I love that the reason Nami was acting so crazy last episode wasn't because of the big revelation that the island got shot into the sky, but because of the revelation that that means there's treasure on it. I also love Luffy's reaction to the fact that they have to camp out in the forest instead of on the ship. Zoro comments on the Mary missing half a wing, but like, they were already missing half a wing before the fire guy attacked. Why didn't he know that? Is he stupid? Episode 166. The action in the beginning is well choreographed and fairly well animated, but I'm kind of glad that it got cut off quickly because the interactions between the Straw Hats are gold this episode. Sanji getting mad at Usopp for eating the heart-shaped carrots, Nami wearing glasses, Zoro carrying Usopp's shoes back for him, Luffy getting ready to beat up Gonfall, Usopp and Luffy begging Robin to keep their campfire up, but most importantly, I think the wolf dance party is about the funniest thing that has ever happened in the show. I wish I was recording my actual reaction because I was laughing so hard. I also really like the music that plays in this scene. It's got a really catchy rhythm that I can't share due to copyright reasons. The scene being so lighthearted is also a good avenue to Gonfall's little talk about Verth. All in all, this is an extraordinary calm before the storm episode. We all know shit's about to go down hard, it's just a matter of how fast that hard happens. Episode 167. Usopp asking Zoro to keep watch while he urinates is funny, especially because Usopp actually sees some sort of ghost fixing the Mary. Who are you, ship ghost? I would like to issue a formal apology to Mont Blanc Cricket for calling him a thumb. Clearly I was mistaken as to who the real thumb is. I don't know why, but Eneru's big entrance feels kind of like a shitpost. It's the words that he says when he does it. Just the casual, hello boys. I also really like his design. It's hard to pin down what exactly about it is so good, but he has a very uniquely drawn face, which I'm always a fan of. Man, Usopp's a real asshole for this one, taking advantage of Chopper's excitement to use him as bait. Dragging the Mary along stone and downstairs like that is gonna risk serious damage to her. I get that this is a fantastical world, but that is not how you treat a boat. The Mary deserves more respect than that. It brought them all the way to the sky. Episode 168. Chopper try not to be adorable challenge failed. Oh, Luffy found a stick. That's a good stick. I don't get how Zoro doesn't know what's so good about it. I like Gonfall's explanation as to why the upper yard is so holy, since that large of a quantity of blue sea stuff being dropped all at once seems kind of like a blessing. I also really like this scene where Gonfall is negotiating a treaty between the Shandorans and the Sky People. Wiper is a great example of becoming radicalized because of how you've faced oppression your whole life. Sure, he's fighting for freedom, but he's fighting the wrong way, demanding the sacrifice of innocence. I could draw parallels to modern conflicts, but there's no need to, because this is something that happens time and time again throughout all of history. And now that the political speak is over, I like this big snake. I also love Chopper's Scooby-Doo ass run. I also like Eneru being from a different Sky Island than Skypiea. It explains why he's got those long ass ears and drums instead of wings. It's not like that really needed explaining, but it's nice that it was. Episode 169. So it turns out the big secret behind the priest's powers was dials the whole time. Even ordinary household dials are being used as high-tech weaponry. Is it just me, or is this whole arc kind of turning into a statement on the fuckassery of war? Eneru is literally sitting in his opulent castle debating whether or not his men will survive. While everyone is out there putting their lives on the line, he's treating it like he's spectating a Fortnite match. And if that's not a statement on how those who start wars are privy to their benefits without being subjected to their horrors, I don't know what is. Gonfall also describes Montara as being sort of like hearing the voice of every living creature, which again I have to point out the parallels between that description and Zoro's fight with Mr. One. According to Newton, after using that reject dial, this man is, as they put it in the meta
medical field fucked. Also, this episode is the start of the Bon Voyage intro, and it's already one of my favorites. Episode 170. I mentioned last time that the new intro is playing, but I do also want to mention I'm pretty sure that's the same 3D Mary asset as the fourth movie Dead End Adventure used. I also like how this little diagram demonstrates just how lost everyone gets. Everyone except Robin, that is. She's the intelligence queen. She's also got some big-ass hands. As a lanky person with big hands, I feel seen. All the conflict almost makes it feel like this is the climax, or at least ramping up to the climax of this arc, but Netflix says we still have another 30-ish episodes to go. So as cool as it is to see Zoro shoot someone with a sword, I don't think I'd be able to handle what would amount to be like 45 episodes of non-stop fighting. Also, Eneru's powers are electricity, and Sanji found out the hard way. You know, as a lanky guy with big hands, I feel seen. One Piece is great at hitting that target demographic. Episode 171. I'm starting to think this Eneru guy is kind of a dick. I also find it highly suspicious that he's aware of the value of gold beyond it being worth. Is he even from a sky island? I really like this Luffy versus Wiper fight, but I also feel like Luffy would have way too much awareness of his battlefield to get eaten by a snake. He's demonstrated to have way better reaction times in earlier episodes this arc. There's gold in them there, snake. Having a whole bandolier of axe tiles feels like it's cheating, right? To be fair, having iron balls in the sky is also pretty much cheating, so I guess it's even Stevens in the end. So these two, Satoru's brothers, say he's straight up dead, which means Sanji, even in his extra crispy state, has the highest kill count out of the Straw Hats so far. Well, on screen that is. Robin spent years as an assassin. Episode 172. Robin mentions how the ruins in the sky date to an era that has been erased from history. A duration of approximately 100 years, about 800 years prior. That means these ruins are pretty significant historically. So I'm angry on Robin's behalf when that guy starts smashing them. But as for the Chopper Gidatsu fight, I don't really like Gidatsu as a character. The gimmick of being such an idiot he doesn't know his own basic bodily functions is just not very funny to me. Props to Chopper for acting like a good doctor and saving an innocent person's life, but the rest of the fight just really isn't that interesting. Don't get me wrong, I love to see Chopper get a win under his belt, but it really feels like Gidatsu was fighting his own ineptitude more than he was fighting Chopper. Also, I really did not expect Konas and Pagaya to make it back into the story. I'd say Konas might join the crew, but we haven't gotten an extended flashback episode or two for her. And you can't have a new crewmate without an extended flashback episode or two. Except for Robin. Episode 173. Oh, so Eneru ate the lightning version of Crocodile, Smoker, and Ace's type of fruit. And he's strong enough to send a current through wood. But that's all utterly meaningless because Luffy's already immune to lightning. Now if only he was also immune to getting eaten by snakes. Fart dial. Why does a fart dial exist and how is it so potent of a weapon? The disrespect that these two soccer ball goats are showing to Sanji and Usopp is unreal. At least Nami manages to treat them in kind. Sanji in shambles that he didn't get to see Nami make this face. Considering what we see one of those sticks do to Eneru not 5 minutes after this, that is a very dangerous weapon to be holding in Nami's face. Seriously, that thing's basically a lightsaber. Also, I can't believe that this has actually turned into an honest-to-God Fortnite battle royale. This is where Netflix arbitrarily breaks up the Sky Island arc, so it's where I'm going to break it up too. It's only one episode earlier than if I were to do it by broadcast order anyways. Pierre's horse fruit is C tier. It's modeled after a regular horse. The Pegasus mode is due to starting off as a bird and isn't actually built into the fruit. There were a lot of comments about me predicting things every time I pointed out the Mary getting damaged, so now that the opportunity presents itself, I do just want to say that the series has always made a big point of showing when the Mary gets damaged, and especially so in this saga. All the way back at Reverse Mountain, Laboon broke the figurehead off. In Jaya, Bellamy breaks the entire front end of the ship off with his spring powers, leaving a permanent scar in the form of an iron brace. And even though the Sorayama Alliance fixes are up there, it's explicitly a rushed job. The whole catching on fire thing and the mask getting torn out, something that's already happened multiple times, again, think of Laboon, are pointed out as being potential causes of serious damage. Usopp, as far back as Drum Island, has been demonstrated to only be capable of amateur patch-ups despite his great care for the Mary as a gift from Kaya. Well, all that and after the first round of comments, I started playing into it a little bit because it increased my engagement levels. Sorry, it's just what you have to do on YouTube nowadays. Also, Enel's name is translated differently depending on what version of One Piece you consume. So as a compromise, I'm going to be referring to him as Eneru in the shorts and Enel in the non-short segments, so nobody will be happy. The first half of the Skypiea arc is very well done. It sets up a lot of intrigue surrounding Enel as a mysterious powerful figure that should be feared, and generally does the whole culture shock thing, pun intended, pretty well as an avenue to exposit about the Sky Islands. And the exposition moves quickly so the plot can take the time it needs to simmer like a nice pasta sauce. I also thoroughly enjoy the decision to have Enel remain as a mysterious mysterious almighty figure throughout most of this introduction, only placing him in the direct line of action towards the end of this first half of the arc. I'll admit though, there are some contrivances I'm not a big fan of, like having Luffy get swallowed by a snake to keep him from solving the arc in 10 minutes, but the overall writing is still incredibly strong. Time for another round of rapid fire thoughts. I love how Robin has almost zero interest in fighting and just wants to figure out the history of the upper yard. I thought Wiper's name was spelled like windshield wiper until I double checked, so I had to cut a frankly pretty crap toilet humor joke. I seriously can't overstate just how much I laughed at the wolf dance party. It was grade A hilarious. I love that kind of humor. The position of God of Skypea is very intriguing to me. Like, is it normally an elected one, or is it something that's inherited? I'm sure that last one is a question that'll be answered somehow, but for now we're gonna take a look at
Protect, the last great performance,
which is the third special episode, airing between episodes 174 and 175 of the anime.
The gist of the plot is that the Straw Hats are on an island at the same time a roaming theater troupe happens into town. Excited to see the legendary actor Randolph in his final performance, the Straw Hats buy tickets to the play and wind up in the backstage area through their usual shenanigans. While Nami is initially against everyone trying all the costumes, when the crew stumbles upon Randolph's rehearsal, they're all enamored. Unfortunately, 3 of Randolph's actors quit right before the performance, but Nami generously volunteers for a small fee of 100,000 berries. The Straw Hats, being completely untrained and unrehearsed, are all varying degrees of terrible. Usopp is too focused on getting the limelight, Sanji can't put his feelings for Nami aside, Robin is acting like she's in a musical, and Luffy... Thankfully, the first act is saved by Randolph stepping in on cue. During the intermission, Randolph finds out that the Straw Hats are indeed pirates, and thanks to the trauma of his entire family and village being destroyed by pirates that also left him with a degenerative condition that will one day rob him of his ability to speak, he's reasonably upset. Him and Luffy fight, then stop fighting when they agree the show must go on. But unfortunately, the second act is interrupted by the Marines, who have come to arrest Randolph. You see, Randolph used to be a Marine lieutenant, and one of his subordinates was a man named Governor, who stole Marine weapons to sell to pirates for cash and killed a fellow Marine private to cover it up. Governor was court-martialed, but there wasn't enough evidence to actually convict him, so he spent the next 30 years working his way up the ladder for revenge. Said revenge was to plant 3 fake actors in Randolph's troop for presumably years, who would smuggle weapons onto a ship and quit 30 minutes before his final performance just to devastate him and credibly accuse him of the crime that Governor committed. Also, Governor could have Randolph court-martialed and thrown in Marine prison. The Straw Hats break Randolph out of Marine custody, and because the show must go on, they volunteer to protect Randolph's theater ship until the play is finished. Cue them doing exactly that for the remainder of the episode, Governor losing the respect of all his men, and Randolph realizing that what makes someone bad isn't being a Marine or a pirate, but the amount of hate and corruption in their heart. Everyone lives happily ever after, and Luffy promises to come back someday to finish kicking that old man's ass.
The last great performance might be my favorite special so far. The extra costumes the Straw Hats wear are all A++, and it's quite possibly the funniest One Piece has been up until now. I love the little goofy bits like Robin casually walking off stage when she realizes the play isn't a musical, and Chopper being relegated to the role of camel after being so excited to learn what a play is. The character work is also really on point. One specific highlight being Nami empathizing with Randolph's trauma thanks to her messed up childhood. Commander Governor is kind of forgettable as a villain though. His motivation is just generic brand, I want to be the top dog and get revenge on the one who sent me back. And his presence carries no weight or intimidation factor. He lacks strength, charisma, cunning, or anything else needed to make a great antagonist. His character design isn't even memorable in a bad way like Bane's was. Everything about him is just generic slop. Out of the 3 specials so far, he's for sure the weakest villain writing-wise, which is saying a lot because Captain Joke spent 90% of the adventure in the Ocean's Naval as a laughing bat. The other supporting characters aren't really much to write home about either. The only really interesting one was Randolph. Everyone else from his troop were really just background characters who were handed the talking sticks for 3 to 4 lines each. And even then, if you take away the actor angle, Randolph himself is kind of the same stock character that you get in every one of these specials. Really, the only thing that this special has going for it is that the comedy is so good. Seriously, every joke hits perfectly. I guess that makes my opinion on it similar to my thoughts on Ruluka Island in that regard. The two are very similar levels of quality. Ultimately, a rather enjoyable experience, but nothing to seek out specifically.
Cover stories. Welcome back to the corkboard. I pre-filled it this time. That took 10 minutes, not counting taking the other one down. It's time for another round of cover stories that I should have talked about earlier. The Alabasta Saga was rich with cover stories. We've got 3 this time. Starting with The Diary of Kobe Meppo. Just like Buggy's cover story, Kobe Meppo was adapted into the anime as episodes 68 and 69 between Whiskey Peak and Little Garden. The story chronicles what happened to Kobe and Helmeppo after the defeat of Axe Hand Morgan and Shell's Town. The captions for each cover are as follows. Kobe and Helmeppo, after the fact. Odd jobs, an off-base break. Study, odd jobs for the Morgan arrangement ship. Odd jobs on deck. Odd jobs, The ship of Marine Headquarters Vice Admiral Garp. The delivery of Morgan. The Headquarters Vice Admiral lets down his guard. The unbelievable hostage Eppo. Morgan's escape. Prepare to fire. Obstruction of bombardment. Obstruction of bombardment obstruction. Obstruction of bombardment obstruction. Helm Eppo's determination. Vice Admiral Garp's negligence. Morgan alone. Helm Eppo's return. Apology. We are worthless. 5 seconds till Garp's speech.
I shall take these two under my wing.
Kobe Meppo to the Marine Headquarters. Odd jobs at Marine Headquarters. Special training during valuable sleeping time. Every day, special training. A small farewell. Laughing Garp and the hard-working young men.
Because this was also adapted in the anime, I don't feel the need to go in depth about my opinions on it because I kind of already have. Django's Dance Paradise chronicles what happened to Django following the events of Syrup Village. I also printed out this whole stack of covers, but it's not gonna fit on the corkboard. There's not enough space, so I'm just leaving Kobe Meppo up so I have to do less pin work. Django's Dance Paradise was actually kind of adapted into the anime somewhat. This set of cover stories is the canon story of what happened to Django and how he eventually joined the Marines, but it was all loosely adapted into Django's Dance Carnival, a short film that was attached to the second movie. Beyond sharing the same basic premise of what if Django wound up on Mirrorball Island, the two stories are incredibly different. So I'll be going more in depth on the cover story, starting with this one.
Django wakes up in the forest outside of Syrup Village after getting a war crime by those kids, and is left behind by the Kuro pirates who likely presumed him dead. He makes his way to the village proper for a meal, but is chased out of town by the Usopp pirates, who threaten to war crime him again. He passes by Axehand Morgan, whose recent escape places this timeline-wise just after the diary of Kobe Meppo, and the Usopp pirates become Kaya's faithful bodyguards while she studies medicine. Django eventually makes his way to Mirrorball Island, a tourist destination in the East Blue. The Marines are searching for him, so he's forced to put on a disguise, yet enters and wins a dance contest nonetheless. The second place contestant was actually Full Body from the Baratier arc, whose subordinates find Django's clothes and inform him, which is how Django learns he's a Marine, as the two were becoming quick friends. Mirrorball Island is then attacked by the Tulip Pirates. Django escapes while Full Body fights them off until they take a hostage, but Django stops his escape attempt and valiantly saves the day. Despite Django and Full Body's bond, Full Body still has to arrest him, and Django is sent to trial. By Dance. Okay, not exactly trial by dance, he's actually found guilty before Full Body objects with Dance. Due to his actions on Mirrorball Island and his sick moves, Django is acquitted of his piracy charges, but Full Body is demoted due to his trial behavior. Django is going to hypnotize the both of them so they don't have to remember the loss of their friendship, but everyone lives happily ever after when Hina interrupts and accepts both of them as chore boys. The next time these two appears at the end of the Alabasta arc, when they've been promoted but are still serving directly under Hina's command. The differences between Django's Dance Paradise and Django's Dance Carnival are enough to where comparing the two is kind of pointless, and I really enjoyed both versions of the story. Django is a character I started off disliking, but who I really enjoy in retrospect, so it's lots of fun to see how he got to the point where he randomly reappeared in Alabasta. The inclusion of Full Body was also a bit of an odd choice for me, but you gotta admit, those two make one hell of a power couple.
Our next cover story is Hachan Seafloor Stroll, and as far as I know, this one hasn't been adapted into the anime, like, at all. Also, it's the longest one so far at 40 pages. It's definitely not gonna fit on the corkboard.
The story starts with Hachan escaping from a Marine ship. Remember Hachan? He's the octopus guy from Arlong Park that I thought Zoro had killed. Turns out the Marines got him. Then ungot him. Hachan makes his way along the seafloor with the intent of returning home, coming across a panda shark with a hook stuck in it. He removes the hook and is rewarded with meat. He gives the meat to a hungry stranded fisherman and is given a ring as a reward. He returns the ring to the wedding that it was fished up from and is given a trident as a reward. He uses the trident to kill a big fish, and a smaller fish spits up a mermaid girlfriend as a reward. Hachan and his new girl pal are met with some of Hachan's old friends, and he gives him the mermaid to get a treasure map to a special takoyaki recipe as a reward. You see, he wants the special takoyaki recipe to win over an octopus lady, but when he makes his way to the end of the map, there is no takoyaki recipe. Only a giant octopus that Hachan kills out of anger. He rushes to the people that scammed him and frees the mermaid since the deal wasn't legit. But also it was legit because there was a big jar of takoyaki sauce hidden inside the octopus. Hachan is elated because that means he gets to keep all the treasure and he can propose to his octopus lady interest. But she isn't home. And in fact, the whole catfish village was crushed by a sinking ship. Hachan rushes off unexpectedly with the treasure, only to return with a ton of takoyaki cooking supplies. Enough to make takoyaki for the whole catfish village using the special sauce. But alas, there's only one serving left, and Hachan has to decide between his octo fiancé-to-be and the village elder. But it's okay. The rejection made him realize that his real dream was to open a takoyaki stand with his childhood friends that are still in Marine custody. The grateful catfish village built Hachan his own mobile takoyaki stand, and everyone lives happily ever after, except for the ones still in Marine custody.
For being the longest cover story so far, it's somehow also the least consequential. Other than Hachan, every character in the story is new, and the stakes are only ever as deep as Hachan's love life. Which isn't to say it's bad, it's actually quite the enjoyable jaunt to read all in one go. And even the week-to-week wait probably wouldn't have been all that bad considering you also got a whole last chapter of One Piece and whatever the hell else they printed in that week's Jump. I do feel bad for the handful of Japanese teenagers in 2001 who were only in it to find out if Hachan gets the girl, though. With every cover story so far, the time between the end of one and the start of the next was at most 10 chapters. That's a lot of time in weeks, but not a lot of chapters considering the series has amounts to count of over 1100 by this point. Wapple's Omniverse Raw is no exception to this start rule, but Wapple's Omniverse Raw also lands itself in the Sky Island Saga because it starts at chapter 236. So we're going to take a look at that and the cover story that came next a little later. In the meantime, let's start the SBS. I read through all of the SBS segments for the Alabasta Saga, but I don't have enough friends to do another batch of examples, so I'm just going to mention a few highlights without specifics. I really like the running gag of the SBS hijacking group that went on for a couple of SBSs, with Timmy being a key character. Oda also mentioned receiving a lot of copycat postcards after the first one, so I am assuming the joke got beaten to the ground. At one point, Oda confirms that specifically Buggy's penis is detachable, just like the rest of his body, and in Volume 13's SBS, Oda goes in depth about Zoro's sword and the origin of Usopp's sniper goggles, including the rough draft of a scrap page that was eventually adapted into the Logtown arc of the anime. In the Volume 14 SBS, Oda mentioned showing his face would make him too recognizable for his liking, and mentions that Fishman Island is roughly halfway across the Grand Line, which makes the joke at the end of the Baratie arc where Yosuke is mistaken for a fishman a little more funny to me. In Volume 15, Oda gives all of the Straw Hats birthdays. Luffy is May 5th, Zoro is November 11th, Nami is July 3rd, Sanji is March 2nd, and most importantly, Usopp is April 1st. I say this is the most important because that's also my birthday. Most of the dates are also number puns in the Japanese language according to the One Piece wiki. I wouldn't know for sure, I can barely count to 10. Ichi, ni, son, shi, go, roku, nana, hachi, kyu, jiu. In Volume 19, Oda confirms that Chopper would be 15 in human years. I was expecting like 10 at most. 15 is... wow. You can tell he was homeschooled. It's also confirmed that Dory and Brogy are almost 160 years old, but that giants live to be about 300.
Oda-sensei, out of the 5 crew members, Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, Nami, and Sanji, what animals do you think they would most resemble?
Luffy's a monkey. Zoro is a shark. Usopp, an armadillo. Nami's a cat. And Sanji's a duck. But there is one thing I am confident about. I think Chopper is a reindeer. At the end of Volume 21, Oda spends the entire SBS segment explaining why he can't answer many questions about the anime because other than providing a few extra character designs, he just doesn't work on it. In Volume 23, Oda points out the differences between a fishman and a mermaid after a reader got curious while reading Hachan's Seafloor Stroll. Fishman is when upper half fish, mermaid is when lower half fish. But I think the best bit of information is that in the same volume, Oda confirmed my suspicion that Mr. 7 gets his eyebrows redone every time he gets a promotion. But for as fun as the SBS is, there's also one more fan-submitted segment in the One Piece volume releases, and it stars everyone's favorite, Captain Usopp. The Usopp Gallery Pirates segment is pretty straightforward. It consists of fan art submitted to Shonen Jump's offices to get printed in volumes of One Piece. The segment typically features at the end of each volume and has a header drawn by Oda. All of the art is submitted by fellow fans of One Piece, so I don't think it would be proper of me to show it off in a super critical way, especially because a lot of the people who submit are very young or very amateur. So instead, I'm going to critique a higher power, Viz Media. As the primary distribution and localization group for Shonen Jump in America, Viz Media set out to do their own version of the Usopp Gallery Pirates featuring American fan art. They couldn't reprint the original galleries thanks to that silly little bundle of international copyright laws, so this was actually the best they could do. Unfortunately for Viz, there wasn't a lot of interest in a local version of Usopp's Gallery Pirates. The feature ended up only appearing in 8 volumes, 7, 9, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 20, before being brought back as a one-time revival in volume 61. A majority of the submissions were from people aged 10 to 15 years old, so they aren't the world's greatest art, but again, they all show a lot more gumption than some schmuck in his 20s standing in front of a camera holding a microphone critiquing children's artwork.
What criteria do you use to pick your Usopp Gallery Pirates?
Well, the drawing skill, how fun it is, the artistic sense, but of course the most valuable thing for any postcard is spirit. Sky Island, the Golden Bell. I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode. Episode 174. Other than Zoro's directional mishaps and Luffy's adventures inside of a giant snake, this episode's big focus is on Robin having an Indiana Jones adventure. I gotta say,
say I'm a big fan, especially with these creative uses of her devil fruit powers. But as good as the action is this episode, I think the real kicker comes from the discovery of the City of Gold. And also, the ease with which it is cut makes me want to taste these Sky Island clouds. The existence of a poneglyph in the sky means they're at least 800 years old, from around the time of that 100-year period that got erased. And as Robin says, they might hold the secret to the real history of the world, which makes them a super interesting plot element. Speaking of old things, Pagaya here mentions that the waiver from the old ship has a special kind of dial in it called a jet dial. That means it probably goes super fast. Now they just need to give it a red paint job so it goes even faster.
Episode 175.
Poor Chopper has had run-ins with 3 of the 4 priests now. At least he managed to turn around in time to get a scar on his chest, because as we all know, a scar on a man's back is a sign of shame. Luffy, please don't punch the snake sphincter. No wonder that thing is so upset. I love the scene where the Southbird is doing the math on whether or not to drop Zoro. It's really funny. And since it does, all the major groups are represented in this final fight. You have the Skypians, the Shandorans, Eneru's group, the Blue Sea Dwellers, and of course, the most important group, Giant Snake. Truly, the snakes have never been higher.
Episode 176.
I'm starting to think Wiper's just kind of an asshole. He's not even focused on killing God's men, he's just lashing out at anyone and everything. I like the floppy Extendo sword. If there isn't already a toy of this, like one of those Extendo lightsabers, then they missed out on some serious cash. Poor Chopper seriously needs a doctor. Oh. The giant snake is just kind of built different. If I had someone clawing at my insides with a rock, I definitely wouldn't be laughing. Also, in terms of the priest gimmick, this guy ranks in 2nd place. I like his the only way to salvation is death vibe more than I like Gedatsu or Satori, but Fire Guy didn't really have an annoying gimmick, so he still ranks on top. Plus, the only reason that this guy is still around is because he camped out at the ending. Bush camping in the final circle is so lame.
Episode 177.
I love Luffy's little Usopp impression, and Gonfal's shock at him being the captain is great. The show is really making a point of hammering in that man has feared lightning since the beginning point, and Eneru is certainly intimidating to the characters actually fighting him right now, but given that he's made of lightning, it's kinda easy to see the path forward because Luffy is literally immune to lightning. He's gonna get his ass handed to him on a silver platter by a rubber man. Setting up a dome around the battlefield is also so cliche. What is this, the Simpsons movie? I have suddenly been made aware that this episode came out 3 years before the Simpsons movie. Nami is relieved to see Aisa isn't hurt, but what about my boy Pierre, Nami? Why are you just gonna do him like that? I also really like how Luffy has kept his stick with him the whole time. A man never gives up a good stick.
Episode 178.
The Sky Priest talks big game about how Zoro can never hide from him, and he can always hide from Zoro. And so what does Zoro do? He puts on his trusty bandana, and he finally learns the secret technique. How to shoot someone with 3 swords at once. A big deal is made of how these sky clouds are as hard as iron, which I genuinely thought was like a setup because Zoro learned how to cut steel when he fought Mr. One. But especially with all the taunting that the priest does here, it would have been the perfect setup for Zoro to be like, psych, I learned how to use Mantra. But instead, he just wins the old-fashioned way, and I guess I've just been confidently incorrect this whole time. I like how Luffy takes one look at the illusory skeletitties and immediately assumes that Nami died, even though she was speaking to him. Also, the bit where Luffy stops Aisa from killing Gonfall, you know shit gets real when Luffy gets serious. Eneru eats this apple like he's a goddamn horse. He even eats the core! That being said, I really like his interaction with Robin, because there's gotta be a reason that he's not immediately executing her like he did to everyone else he came across. Also, this is one hell of a way to end an episode. Pagaya, no! But also the visual style was still really cool when that happened, so his death wasn't entirely in vain.
Episode 179.
Kon is abandoning her patience. Chopper would never. I say that, but she is also under duress again. The Lightning Logia is either way more potent than it has any right to be, or Crocodile, Smoker, and Ace were just holding themselves back. Compare this to Honey Queen or Gaspard from the movies, and it's just on a completely different tier of power. I get Aisa being shocked at Pierre turning into a horse, but she's already seen Luffy stretch, so there's no reason that she should be shocked by him stretching. Oh, that poor snake. First it starts crying, then it gets turned into a crispy side dish. Framing this scene where Eneru is talking to the final survivors about how many are left from Nami's perspective is actually a really smart way to up the intimidation factor. None of these guys probably stand a chance because they're not made of rubber, but Nami is the weakest out of all of them, meaning she's the most vulnerable, and she's protecting Chopper. Even though everyone else stands against Eneru, it still keeps him extra intimidating.
Episode 180.
This scene with the kid on the beach talking about how his father is a divine warrior, being followed up by Eneru basically saying, LOL, yeah, I totally killed them. Absolutely heartbreaking. We get an official name for Eneru's devil fruit, the Rumble Rumble fruit. And I hate to say it, but I think Eneru might actually win, because unlike every other villain so far, he's fighting for a dream, and the main theme of the series is that pursuit of your dreams is like the big thing that you should do.
This scene where Eneru executes Gonfall is hardcore. He straight up melts a hole through his helmet.
I also like when Wiper hits him with the Sea Prism Stone rejectile combo, he actually sounds like he's begging for his life, like for the
the first time he's actually afraid. And it looks like he's dead, but there's too many episodes left this arc for him to actually be dead, so we'll just have to wait and see what anime asshole comes up next episode. Episode 181. Oh, so Eneru, upon dying, can just restart his own heart. You know your devil fruit is busted when you can just say no to dying. Why does poor Nami always have to deal with the tyrannical murderers? Nami's waiver is leaving a trail, which at first I thought was going to be how Luffy would find her, but no, Aisa can just use Montero to locate them. Poor Pierre, doing the thankless job of keeping Aisa safe from falling. I also really like that despite Luffy's goofy shenanigans in the snake, when he sees his friends in trouble, he immediately leaps towards them. It's hard to strike a good balance between goofiness and seriousness, and Luffy's characterization manages to hit that bar just perfectly every time. I really like that the value Eneru sees in gold is that it's highly conductive and not that it's worth money in the blue sea. It also makes a lot of sense because he has a god complex. God doesn't need money. Episode 182. Let's get this out of the way right at the start. This is, in fact, the funniest face that could possibly be made in the history of funny faces. I love how it stems from character reasons too, with Eneru underestimating mere paramecia. That just so happens to be his one weakness incarnate. Eneru may be able to restart his heart, but can he restart his pride? I also like Konus's plea to the Sky People to evacuate the Sky Island. And this character with one line is peak character design. Sorry, I don't make the rules, she just is. The way Robin talks about transporting them, I find it hilarious that Eneru didn't actually manage to kill any of the final survivors. Like, he's still a huge threat, especially with everyone still being evacuated, but it just lessens the impact of his presence a little bit, especially since he's about to get his ass kicked by a rubber man. Episode 183. You know it's about to be a real throwdown when Luffy throws Nami his hat. Finally, we know Eneru's ultimate plan to destroy Skypiea. Climate change. I love that Eneru's lightning abilities include the ability to heat gold to the point that he can reshape it. It also makes the fight a lot more tense, especially since Eneru is also fighting for a dream. Eneru's dream of endless birth versus Luffy's dream of becoming the king of the pirates. It's a matter of who has the stronger conviction to achieve their dream. At the end of the day, we know Luffy is gonna win and Skypiea probably won't be destroyed. But this is the first time the series has delved into the idea that two people might have dreams that clash with one another. Goku stalks in shambles as Luffy learns Ultra Instinct without even trying. But seriously, this is a really creative way to combat the Montero ability. If I don't know what I'm doing, my opponent doesn't either. We call that the American strategy. Episode 184. Pierre and Aisa. No! Sticking Luffy in a big golden ball is a clever way to prolong the fight and the arc. Normally, I'm not a fan of prolonging things for the sake of prolonging them, but it means Usopp and Sanji get to come back into play, so that's fun. I can't believe Nami really hit Eneru with the real treasures of friends we made along the way. Giga Ched Usopp saving the day with the Usopp. But there's only a limited amount of rope on that thing, which means Sanji kicked that hook so hard that it lifted Usopp into the air. Konus racing back is sweet and all, but realistically, what is she gonna do the rest of this arc? I guess emergency first aid duty if she can get to God's shrine quick enough. I can't believe Sanji has Montero, but specifically for locating women that he finds attractive. Being able to locate Nami anywhere is such a specific superpower. Episode 185. Eneru's really got it coming for him now. He has to fight the great Captain Usopp. Usopp's secret technique of shouting a bunch of uncomfortable things not phasing Eneru at all is funny. Robin doing an ant-style carry for her fellow victims of Eneru is also really funny. And Sanji acting all high and mighty saying he'd sacrifice Usopp if it meant saving Nami, it was also a great gag. There's lots of great jokes this episode, but that one specifically has an amazing payoff when Sanji saves Usopp and sacrifices himself to do so. I also like that Sanji put on his thinking cap this episode and wrecked the interior of the ship so it can't fly anymore, or at the very least can't pollute anything anymore. Now if only he'd realized that smoking is just as bad for your lungs as giant lightning clouds are for destroying islands. Episode 186. I've got no clue how deep the merchandising for this show goes, but I need a pair of Usopp Octo Shoe slippers. Usopp and not unhooking the name a more iconic duo. You're telling me Sanji only bothered to dislocate a single gear? Pierre cannot be light enough for Aisa to carry like that. Oh, that bird is so big, it's probably like, I don't mean to fat shame Pierre, he's probably like 120 pounds. That's only because birds have hollow bones, by the way. Luffy's really just gonna run up the entire beanstalk and punch Eneru in the face. You know what? I can respect that. Eneru's KDR is looking worse and worse by the moment. The only ones he's actually managed to kill are two nameless characters and Pagaya. Admittedly, there's probably also going to be a fair number of Skypians that don't make it out of the evacuation. We can all hope for the best for them, but they're fighting a literal act of God. Episode 187. We are amidst the climax, and everything is coming together for one final confrontation, which means it's finally time for a flashback episode? This episode focuses on Mont Blanc Noland, and Wiper's ancestor, the great warrior Kagura, which, you know, I wasn't expecting. This whole time I thought the Shandorans had wings because they interbred with the Sky People, but I guess they've just always had wings. Noland rushing in, cutting off that snake
snake's head during the sacrifice would be like rushing into a Catholic church during communion, beheading Jesus, and then ripping the clothes off of a priest. No wonder these guys are upset. Obviously, sacrifice isn't how you stop an illness, and it was a situation of immediate danger, so Nolan didn't really have a way to ease the idea of medicine to them. But I still feel like there's gotta be a better option than beheading the god of the sun, you know? I also love the sense of dramatic irony that comes from the knock-up stream hitting Shandor repeatedly before launching it into the sky. If there's one thing Oda is great at, it's using irony to its full effect. Episode 188. This scene where Kagura kills what he's revered as a god and then asks, "What have I killed?" as a point to illustrate their cultural differences and how he believes Nolan can actually help is so good. There's something kind of funny about how this flashback that takes place 400 years before the main story refers to a period of 400 years before it as ancient history. I also like how the history of the Shandorans takes a lot from Mesoamerican cultures in the real world. Well, you know, without the whole conquistadors invading thing. Of course, I'm not an expert on the topic, so I'm mostly going based on what I learned in 8th grade history class, and that was years ago. Also, the giant snake as a little baby snake is so adorable. I also like how, in the same way that their cultural differences allowed Kagura and Nolan to become friends, something Nolan did that he didn't know would be offensive is also what's going to drive them apart. Either that or Kagura finally realized that chestnut on his head was hair instead of a hat. Episode 189. According to that checklist I had for new crewmates a couple episodes back, I think the most likely candidate for the new crewmate is Mont Blanc Noland. He's strong, he has an explicit role in botany, he's young enough that he wouldn't be out of place on the Straw Hat crew, and most importantly, he had an extended flashback episode for his tragic backstory. Seriously though, this whole sub-arc is so well put together, and it definitely recontextualizes a lot of Skypiea so far. And it also puts into context just how devastating this destruction is. Nolan and Kagura's tragic friendship is just a beautiful piece of storytelling from end to finish. Poor Nola just sitting there in the destruction. Oh, it literally just hit me that they named the snake after Noland. Now that I think about it, technically the snake is the most likely candidate because Noland is dead, but the snake still has the tragic backstory. Episode 190. I love Luffy's motivation for trying to ring the bell being to free Cricket from his quest for destiny. Even though he's a little late to save Skypiea, and Nami was saved by Usopp and Sanji, Luffy can still save Cricket and the Sarayama Alliance from their futile search for the Golden Bell. The sheer devastation of Eneru's death ball is just visually captured so incredibly, especially with the wake of its devastation still being supercharged with electricity. Eneru's god complex makes him such an interesting villain. On one hand, he's chasing his dream of endless Verth, and pursuit of dreams is something that's a big part of One Piece. But on the other, he's destroying Skypiea not because of his dreams, but because he believes he's superior to them. It allows for him to be thematically aligned with the heroes while still being an adversary to them. Also, damn, Wiper's a glutton for punishment. I don't know how he can still stand after all the shit he's been through this arc. Episode 191. Why does the Arc Maxim look like someone took the Arc Maximer and split it in half? I've been watching too much Delicious in Dungeon because my first thought when Zoro cut the beanstalk was, I wonder if it tastes good. I genuinely started tearing up in this moment where Wiper learns about Cricket's existence. If those two don't hug by the end of this arc, I'm gonna be upset. If Wiper survives, that is. This is like the 3rd time he's used the reject dial. But luckily the great Captain Usopp loosens up Giant Jack for him. I also really like these cutaways to the refugees in the White Sea, especially when it also cuts back to the perils in the White Sea. It helps as a reminder that the stakes are very similar to how they were in Alabasta with an entire country's worth of people on the line. Why is poor Nami subject to so many awkward camera shots? At least that one was just awkward and not as horny as some of the other ones. Episode 192. Luffy put on his big boy brain today by leaping deftly and bravely into the Thunderball. Nah, but seriously, using the golden ball Eneru saddled him with as a weapon to dispel the Thunderball is so cool. And when he manages to do it and dispels all the surrounding clouds too, and you get these beautiful visuals of all the people of the sky praying with the sun shining down on them, a sign of freedom from Eneru's destruction. And Eneru's failure to destroy the upper yard due to the resilience of the Verth means that these people all have somewhere to go back to. Skypiea wasn't destroyed, it was saved. Well, in a tactical manner. I'm pretty sure a lot of people still died on Angel Island. Where the hell did that big ass transformation come from? Eneru's just keeping that in his back pocket the whole time? But of course, ringing the bell, that's the important thing.
We got a #1 victory royale, yeah.
I promise that's the official end of Fortnite jokes until the next time they do a battle royale. Episode 193. The giants from before being projections of shadows cast from the sky, and Luffy's shadow being among them is just such a beautiful visual. Between that and the ringing of the golden bell, there's irrefutable proof that there's an island in the sky. Take that, Bellamy, you dillweed. Damn, Eneru really has a 0 KDR. Even the divine warriors who got off-screen, the only one who gets to stay dead is Pagai. Come on! This is Pell all over again. I also love the joyous exuberance of this party scene and how everyone comes together after such a traumatic event and is just
happy. We are going to steal the moon! No, but seriously, when you think about it, for all intents and purposes, other than killing all those people, Edoru accomplished every goal he had. He lived as god for 6 years, he built his ship, and he gets to escape to his land of endless verth.
The power of dreams stays winning!
Episode 194. I absolutely love this episode. It's got all the fun of post-arc shenanigans dialed up to the appropriate amount. And I love all the moments like Usopp trading for dials, and Zoro training to try to unlock Montara, and everyone pilfering through the innards of a giant snake. But my favorite scene this episode has to be Robin at the Belfry. I think it's safe to say at this point that Robin has stolen the spot of favorite crew member for me, because I absolutely love world building, and she's the one that's most associated with it. Well, that, and I've already expressed how much I absolutely love her design. You know, now that I think about it, Robin is the only one who knows the location of 2 weapons of mass destruction. But I think the real kicker this episode is the ending. Everyone running away from the sky people who just want to give them a gift, and Robin playing along with the crew even though she knows better. This arc has been just about the best it could possibly be. There's only 1 episode left in it, but oh my gosh, it's been great. Episode 195. I'm actually kind of sad to see this arc end. The duration of time spent with these characters made everything connect a little more than usual. So as nice as it is to see everyone live happily ever after, I sincerely hope that the Straw Hats return to the sky someday. Also, I absolutely love the imagery of the giant octopus balloon. Luffy has the right idea. I would bounce on it too if I could. Of course, that's also what caused him to nearly crash, so thank goodness the great Captain Usopp foresaw this happening and traded for just the right dials to prevent a danger. And I know that this is an anime-only thing, but having them land in a marine base is such a good idea. Plus, I've already had people commenting about how they really like this upcoming filler arc, so I guess I'm looking forward to it. Now that we've gotten through the longest arc in the series so far, a sentence I fear I may end up saying again someday, I think we can take a proper look back at it. In the comment section for some of the shorts, I've been seeing people say things along the lines of, I don't get why people skip Skypiea. And I have to say, I completely agree. Yeah, it's a long arc with 43 episodes, and yeah, the first big antagonist the Straw Hats face is kind of meh, but everything else about the arc is simply brilliant. The way this arc presents complex themes and begins to challenge the series' up until this point uncontested ideals only to completely reaffirm them is fantastic. I've been mentioning a lot that the major recurring theme of One Piece so far is the pursuit of dreams. I don't think that's anything controversial to say, especially when the first major collection of story arcs ends with the East Blue crew telling each other how they're all going to achieve their dreams together. This whole saga has been challenging that idea of pursuing dreams in different ways and dismantling said challenges thematically. In Jaya, you had the pessimistic Bellamy get one-shot by Luffy for daring to intrude on Cricket's dream. Wiper's dream of retaking his homeland is constantly sabotaged by his want for revenge for his ancestors. And Nell succeeds in his dream of locating endless verth and only had trouble because of his path of needless destruction conflicting with Luffy's role as someone willing to defend the dreams of others. That doesn't even mention how this arc also delves into politics in a super intriguing way. Previous arc politics have tended to be simple ideas like racial supremacy is a dumb idea, tyranny is bad, don't commit genocide on anime Egypt. But Skypiea creates a complex political web between the Skypians and the Shandorians. I mentioned during the Nolan and Colgar episodes that the Shandorian culture took a lot from pre-colonial Mesoamerica, just without the conquistadors. Shout out to user at 10 Little Men in the comments of episode 188 who drew the connection in my brain between the ancient Skypians and the conquistadors. You know, with the whole displacing natives from their homeland under the justification of holy authority thing. But also, Wiper and the rest of the Shandorians are basically terrorists. Now, terrorist is a pretty charged word to call them, especially because we know the Shandorians are only violent because they faced years of oppression and feel a deep sense of bitter resentment while looking for anyone and everything to blame, using violence as a tool to lash out and get what they feel they're owed. So, you know, terrorists. The Shandorians end up portrayed in a sympathetic light by the end of the arc because Gonfal's had to empathize with them and understand why they felt so much resentment so he could broker peace instead of just further punishing them for the crime of existing. I'm not gonna say that Oda thinks terrorists are cool, especially because a lot of Shandorian actions are portrayed in a negative light. But it is an interesting dive on how generational trauma can radicalize groups and the possibility of combating that radicalization through sympathy, empathy, and ceasing the prolonging of violence. And L's Rumble Fruit goes in S tier, and I don't think I need to explain why. One Piece: The Cursed Holy Sword is the 5th movie to come out in this series, released in theaters across Japan on March 6, 2004. This was 2 years after Toei had ceased their biannual anime fair, meaning Cursed Holy Sword was the second One Piece movie to release on its own and not as part of a double feature. What makes Cursed Holy Sword so special though is, as of now, it is the final One Piece movie to release with a paired short in theaters. Take Aim: The Pirate Baseball King is another 5-minute short in the same vein as Dream Soccer King, only this time it's baseball. Also notable is this time the Straw Hats are going up against Arlong's Fishmen pirates rather than a collective of miscellaneous villains. Oh, and Gonfal is the umpire for some reason. And all of the dialogue is done by Bon Clay, who's doing the announcing with Buggy. The plot is as follows. The Straw Hats and the Fishmen are playing a game of baseball, only instead of regulation balls, they use iron spike balls. First up to bat is Luffy, who's facing the wrong way and is granted a base after Arlong aims for his ass. Next up is Zoro, who strikes out in one swing using his 3-bat style to cut 3 balls at once. Luffy tries to steal a base and gets tagged out, to Coach Nami's disappointment. Up next is Usopp, who runs the bases without even hitting the ball and almost scores a point, if not for his lengthy
monkey nose. Next is Sanji, who's too enamored with Nami to make a proper play. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 outs? It's time to change places. Zoro's 3-mid style fails to catch Arlong's hit, and only Robin's Devil Fruit is able to keep it in the park, allowing the Straw Hats to get all the fishmen out. Eventually it gets to the final inning. Straw Hats up to bat and the score 0-1 in favor of Arlong's crew. Robin, Sanji, and Zoro are all on base and Luffy is up to bat, facing the correct direction this time. Strike 1, Luffy didn't swing. Strike 2, the bat shattered. Left with no other option, Luffy uses the third pitch to unleash his ultimate baseball weapon, the Gum Gum Home Run. The Straw Hats make a 4-point play, Buggy is knocked to pieces by the home run, and everyone lives happily ever after.
There wasn't a reveal that this one was a dream sequence, so I'm going to choose to believe it's all canon. Being another 5-minute long short, the only things I can really say about it is that it's funny. I guess it's also a bit of an odd choice to have the Fishmen pirates as the opposing side, given that I'm pretty sure Arlong hasn't even been mentioned since the end of the East Blue over 100 episodes ago. Actually, that makes now a good time to mention something that I wanted to mention during one of the Arlong Park shorts that I accidentally deleted the original clip of when I meant to include it as bonus material. Arlong is the captain of the Fishman Pirates, yeah? So he has his subordinates tattooed with the crew's logo, like poor Nami, who was branded for 8 years. But him and at least his top brass all have a second shared tattoo. To me, that implies that Arlong and his men used to work for a bigger, stronger Arlong that they defected from while keeping the tattoo tradition. It would make sense why they fled to the East Blue, since Fishman Island is reportedly halfway across the Grand Line, while Nami's village is presumably somewhat close to its entrance. Conspiracy tangent over. Back to baseball. I was a little confused the first time Nami spoke in the short, since, again, all the dialogue is done by Bon Clay, but when the joke hit, I'll admit, I laughed. Also, the fact that they're all playing on a giant roaming baseball field ship is very funny. Do you have 5 minutes to spare? Go watch the actual short. Multiple people have re-uploaded it to YouTube, and honestly, just telling you to watch it is the best review I could give it. Other than that, by all accounts, it was a pretty standard film release. To give context for the state of the anime when it came out, episode 184 broadcast the day after it released in theaters, the episode that now knocks Luffy off the Arc Maxim, and 11 episodes before the end of Skypiea.
We open on pirates attacking a village, gravely injuring a man named Saga who can barely fend them off until he finds a mysterious sword and, as 4Kids puts it, locks them in the dungeon. Cut to the Straw Hats in a restaurant discussing how the island they're on has a legendary treasure, a mysterious 7-star sword. Everyone is there except for Zoro, who gets a surprise knife with his name hurled at him, and Usopp, who is still giving his best to fix the Mary. But the Straw Hats have to flee from Drake. Remember him? Well, keep him in mind for a little longer, and are forced to go inland to avoid abandoning their swordsmen. Flying over a ramp and bouncing off a strange creature's back, the Mary lands in sight of a mysterious girl returning from a dive with 3 sphere-shaped gems. The same girl Saga was protecting in the opening. Her name is Maya. I forgot that when I was writing this. We're just gonna call her Gem Girl. Having pirate-related trauma, she immediately flees, only to be pursued by Luffy, who accidentally tugs Usopp along in pursuit of Zoro's whereabouts. While Luffy and Usopp get lost in the woods, the rest of the Straw Hats end up at the girl's village, and only manage to avoid starting a conflict by the Marines and Zoro showing up and starting one first. Zoro mysteriously attacks the Gem Girl, injuring Sanji, who protects her, and steals the 3 gems from before. Meanwhile, Luffy and Usopp wind up at a Marine sword fighting dojo, where all the Marines have a non-standard outfit that I actually kinda like better than the normal one. Luffy does as Luffy does and tries to Luffy Saga right off the bat, only to be forced off a cliff by the magic sword. Usopp bravely follows of his own volition, avoiding death using his parachute using the trees to break his fall. Back with the other Straw Hats, they make friends with the villagers, and Robin reads the local runes to learn the history of the 7-star sword. Flip back, Usopp finds Luffy's hat and then falls into a cave. For a pretty decent chunk of the rest of the movie, those two will continue to have misadventures, finding traps and obstacles throughout the cavern, and every exit they find leading to an odd tower. It turns out Zoro and Saga have a pretty extensive history, having gone to the same dojo as kids and reconnecting briefly in the East Blue. Zoro dumps the gems he stole into a well that leads deep, deep underground, and it turns out Saga is possessed by the evil sword. You see, the 7-star sword started off as a symbol of the island's royal family, until the island's 3 princes all fell in love with the same priestess and waged literal war over her, using the sword's power. This corrupted the sword, and the only thing that stopped the war was the priest girl sacrificing her own life. And without the gems, the only way the sword can be stopped before the blood moon the next night that would boost it up to full power is for Gem Girl to sacrifice herself, because she's a descendant of the original priestess. I don't know how that works, considering the priestess was presumably single. Well, I guess. Some bullshit happens, and Luffy and Usopp literally erupt from the ground, carrying the gems with the convenient knowledge of the locations of all the towers the gems have to be placed in for the ritual to stop the sword. Things go conveniently well for the Straw Hats as they set their plan in motion and erect a bubble around the island to stop the sword from gaining its full power. Meanwhile, Zoro is fighting for his fucking life. The 7-star sword needs a worthy sacrifice, and Saga thinks that Zoro is the only one who fits the bill. Zoro ends up losing the first confrontation, but the ritual to stop the sword is already in motion, so Saga goes to put an end to it, and succeeds in doing so. The sword manages to not only completely possess Saga, but awaken its full power, and even Luffy fails to defeat him. Well, less fails and more lets Zoro take him on because this is like a matter of pride or something, and Luffy respects that. Zoro defeats Saga, dispelling the evil sword's possession, and everyone lives happily ever after.
Standard disclaimer of I oversimplified a lot of that applies, but even more than usual this time because this was a convoluted one. Cursed Holy Sword reminds me a lot of Chopper's Kingdom on the Island of Strange Animals, because I didn't like either of them very much for very similar reasons. Much like Chopper's Kingdom, Cursed Holy Sword suffers from choosing one of the Straw Hat crew as the character to center the story around. In doing so, the writing is forced to present a dilemma that allows the crewmate, in this case Zoro, to meaningfully overcome it while simultaneously being meaningless in the long-term impact of their character arc. What does Zoro learn in this movie? Don't trust childhood friends if they've been possessed by a magical sword? You should always try to save your friends from being possessed? Speaking of, the magic sword itself is another strike against Cursed Holy Sword. The introduction of a new power system and its corresponding mythical object of choice that exists exclusively on a singular island and will never be brought up again is something that didn't work in Chopper's Kingdom, and it doesn't work here either. If magic swords, gods, and holy magic all exist in the world, why have they never been brought up before? The closest thing to a god so far in the series is the god complex ridden Enel, and Nolan's mini-arc was pretty explicit in the worship of gods being ineffective. Speaking of ineffectivity, the villains are also a big issue. Only one of the secondary villains gets fleshed out in the slightest, and the top henchmen are literally all treated as a joke for the Straw Hats to effortlessly defeat during the climax. The main villain of the movie isn't even the actual main villain. Saga is just a mouthpiece and body being possessed by the 7-star sword. Being possessed by a sword isn't a good excuse to write your villains to be flat and emotionless. Let's try looking at things from a thematic perspective. A staple of One Piece, and really just writing in general, is having an antagonist that embodies everything that you want to be against in your theme. Emperor Palpatine is an authoritarian dictator, manipulator. The Terminator is the end goal of developing autonomous war machines. El Dorado was greedy and valued gold above all else. But what does Saga stand for? The 7-star sword uses him and his marine company as puppets in its quest for power after he uses it to protect the woman he fell in love with. Coincidentally, the 7-star sword was corrupted when three brothers fought for the love of said girl's ancestor. So does the 7-star sword stand in for controlling or toxic relationships? No. In fact, the 7-star sword does its best to eliminate the priest girl, and her love isn't what brings Saga out of his mind control. It's Zoro killing him. It almost reads like the theme of the movie is, getting possessed is bad, you shouldn't do that. That being said, I did like a few things about the movie. Luffy and Usopp make a great duo whenever they're together, and I'm glad to say that this is the first movie to take full advantage of that. Pairing those two off to explore the cave system is an A+ move. The choice to have Zoro finish off the final boss is also a good subversion of the already well-established Luffy saves the day trope that every arc, movie, and special so far has followed. When Luffy doesn't have direct ties to the villain, it feels odd to have him essentially complete another character's arc. Well, this is usually covered by giving the supporting characters a secondary trial to overcome, like Vivi stopping the fighting in Alabasta, or second example, the narrative of Cursed Holy Sword doesn't leave room for that. So solving the issue by simply having Zoro finish things off instead of Luffy serves the narrative well and puts the movie a step above Chopper's Kingdom. Other things I like than that are, I guess I like this gag where the old lady is actually super tall. That's pretty funny. The art direction's pretty nice too, I guess. It doesn't really do anything new with the One Piece style. It's mostly just adopting the same moody atmosphere and darker shading that Dead End Adventure had. If I had to make a recommendation, just skip Cursed Holy Sword. It's inconsistent with One Piece canon and really just not well written in general. I do have to give the movie props though because it didn't include the arbitrary child sidekick. I'm tired of seeing so many moving pictures, so let's take another quick break.
Cover stories. Our next cover story starts with Wapol just going around and fucking with people using his devil fruit powers until he gets arrested by the Marines. Meanwhile, Dalton has been named King of the Sakura Kingdom, and Drum Kingdom is officially no more. Wapol narrowly escapes and is faced with the realization that he's not a king anymore. He's just some random bum. And when bacon goes wrong for him, he resorts to eating literal garbage. But the garbage he spits back up is super popular with children, and he starts selling them as toys until he can build an actual shop. One of the kids brings their new toy home, and their scientist parent discovers that the metal from Wapol's stomach is actually pretty special. Wapol accidentally becomes rich and builds a bigger toy store, which turns into a toy factory, which turns into a holding corporation, which nets him a supermodel bride, and everyone lives happily ever after as Wapol returns to the top of the world completely unchanged by his experience.
Of all the characters I never thought I'd see again, Wapol was one of them. The fact that he created a super metal by accident and was using it to make toys, it just proves to me that his devil fruit belongs in S tier. In the hands of someone smart, they could do much, much more. I'm also a big fan of stories that seem like they're going to redeem redeem some terrible character, only for said asshat to be completely unchanged when they get their money back. The Simpsons has done it like 5 or 6 times at this point with Mr. Burns, and it just doesn't get old, except for when you do it with Mr. Burns 5 or 6 times. This cover story is also a lot shorter and a lot simpler than Hachan's Seafloor Stroll, so I appreciate the brevity. Before getting to the final cover story of the video, I'm gonna hit you with another SBS highlights reel, because I wrote the transition to the next segment before remembering that I also had to cover the SBS. In Volume 25, Chapter 230's SBS, a mistake is pointed out to Oda about Mr. 3 being able to float. As a Devil Fruit user, he should sink like a stone. So Oda on the spot made up a super floaty wood to hold him up. I thought this was funny because the anime just had him floating on a large chunk of regular wood. It's also emblematic of the I didn't make a mistake, it's actually X type SBS answers, where Oda makes light of small errors and minor details, like inventing a guy named Attach who takes photographs when a reader asked where wanted poster photos come from. Volume 26's SBS is all about One Piece being localized into different languages and countries, including spelling and pronunciation. In Volume 27, Chapter 247, Oda mentions Nami's queenliness, which makes me 100% certain that she's secretly royalty. In Volume 28, Chapter 20, Oda comments on how the 7 warlords of the sea are similar to privateers in real-world history. In Volume 29, Chapter 266, Oda confirms that the 4 priests of the Upper Yard's names are derived from religious concepts and promptly apologizes to all religious people. In the end of the same volume, when a reader asks who would win in a serious fight between Sanji and Zoro, Oda makes a sword-fighting joke that works better in Japanese. In Chapter 280 of Volume 30, Oda very conveniently categorizes all the devil fruits so far into 3 categories: Paramecia, Zoan, and Logia. Also, you're probably going to hear me pronounce Zoan as Zone a lot. That's how they pronounced it in Drum Island, and so that kind of stuck with me. I realize now it's pronounced Zoan. And finally, in Volume 32, Chapter 302, the final SBS counted for this saga, Oda answers the question that I've been holding back this whole time. What the hell are those antennae on the Skypeans' heads? The answer is hair. It's just fancy hair that developed over time. Up next is what we've all been waiting for, and by we all, I mean me, because I love Ace. Ace's Great Blackbeard Search. The story starts with none other than everyone's favorite greasy rat of a man doing a dine and dash. You see, Ace is in town looking for information on Blackbeard's whereabouts, and luckily enough, someone tells him where Blackbeard is. Dr. Blackbeard. No relation to the teach of the same name. Beating an innocent man gets him thrown into a river, where he's fished up and given some milk by Moda. She only asks Ace to deliver a letter for her in return. Nowhere Ace wouldn't risk going, just the G2 Marine base. Ace sneaks his way in, helps himself to their food, starts a fight, and has to hide. Meanwhile, the top brass of the base fucking hate the coffee that they've been served during an intelligence meeting. Luckily, it's interrupted by a top-secret intel vessel arriving and mysteriously bursting into flames. Ace heroically jumps in to save the day, revealing himself in the process and almost forgetting to drop off the letter. You see, Moto wants the G2 Marine base to buy her milk, and although Ace absconded with top-secret info while delivering the message, the Vice Admiral thinks it's a good idea. It turns out the people sent out to actually purchase the milk are Moto's parents, and the top brass love it because it makes their coffee taste not like garbage. Everyone lives happily ever after as Ace sets out to fuck Blackbeard's shit up. Y'all know I love me some Ace, so I very thoroughly enjoyed his shenanigans at the G2 base. It's fun to see the little moments that remind you, yeah, him and Luffy are brothers. I absolutely love how there's almost 0 text in any given entry. It really lets the art stand out on its own, and the character actions are more than enough to convey the story, although the captions do help. The introductory panels of the 3 latest cover stories do leave it sort of ambiguous as to who it's about, but if you know anything about the characters or are able to process the hints like Hachan's silhouette having a lot of arms and Wapple's bite marks, it does make it kind of obvious. Also fitting that the final cover story of this video is about Ace infiltrating a marine base, seeing as we have one last arc to cover from the anime, a little filler arc that takes place in the G8 Marine base. I'm watching all of One Piece for the first time and reviewing every episode. Episode 196. This is the start of the G8 Marine Base filler arc, which I already love how much is taking from previous material. Drake and this guy, both debuted in the 4th movie, did an adventure, as well as the Nevero Marine Base itself. And G8 takes its name scheme from the G2 Marine Base from Ace's Great Blackbeard Search, which means even though they don't say it, this guy is a Vice Admiral. I love the concept of splitting all the Straw Hats up. Individually, they could all take out a certain amount of Marines on their own, but if they want to escape a heavily fortified Marine base, they're gonna have to be together to do that. You can tell this is a filler arc because Chopper is hiding the wrong way. I mean the right way. The Mary is shown to be damaged specifically on her underbelly. I was kind of playing into it before with all the does he know comments, but you know, they're definitely gonna have to get that ship fixed. Some of y'all ain't subtle with your comments, but anyone with 2 brain cells could figure out by this point that they need a better shipwright than Usopp. Episode 197. I really dig Nami in the Marine outfit. It looks good on her. It looks slightly less good on Sanji and Luffy, but that's just because Luffy's wearing a hairnet over his hat. I really like how this episode displays
Sanji's competence as a sea chef, not prioritizing flashy fancy cuts and instead using the table scraps left over from those flashy fancy cuts to make something even better. There was no doubt Sanji would be the better chef because he's a crass chain smoker who's constantly horny. That's grade A chef material. So these chef brothers are coming from Marie Joie, which means that they feed the heads of the government. Talk about a demotion. It's also mentioned multiple times that directions in the Marine base are confusing even for people who aren't Zoro, so I feel like that's going to be important later on. How do none of the chefs recognize that this is Monkey D. Luffy, a man with a 100 million berry bounty? I get not recognizing Sanji because he doesn't have a wanted poster, but Luffy? Episode 198. I feel like Zoro could easily break out of those restraints he's in by this point. I also find it hilarious that they keep his swords in a separate cell, not like a vault or anything. I gotta say, big ol' man Dr. Chopper is great. He's so bulky and that mustache is so funny. And it's hilarious that this random 7-foot-tall Sasquatch of a doctor comes in and starts giving orders and the nurses are just like, okie doke. To be fair, he is smart enough that he was genuinely saving lives by doing that. Why is there a pediatrician on a Marine base? I was just assuming that this was the Write Letters Home kind of Marine base and not the your wife and child live down the road kind of military base. Sanji and Luffy getting stuck in the kitchen because Sanji is horny for women is funny. Is Luffy carrying dials on him? Because that looks like a dial. He probably just borrowed a funny one from Usopp, but I want to know what it does. Episode 199. You know Vice Admiral Jonathan is strong because he managed to catch Luffy doing the thing he loves most, trying to steal meat. Not even Sanji is strong enough to keep meat out of Luffy's grasp. This inspector guy is a total asshole, but damn does he have drip. Thankfully, Robin straight up brutalizes him, because I will be damned if it doesn't look far better on her. Usopp immediately getting caught impersonating a Marine is hilarious though. And I don't know what he's thinking this old guy for. He's not the one that made the latest patch-ups to the ship. That was that weird ghost. How dare Vice Admiral Jonathan diss carrots and broccoli. Carrots and broccoli are delicious. Using a chessboard to illustrate how Jonathan is trying to combat the Straw Hats through wits instead of strength is such a good... Well, it's a bit cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's good. I really like the idea of having a villain that challenges the Straw Hats intellectually rather than physically. Episode 200. I'm not gonna lie, Condoriano is the dumbest fake name I have ever heard. I love the idea of Usopp using a fake bad lie to make a real good lie sell. But this is a bottom 10 Usopp face. The old man didn't know about the existence of Sky Islands, but he did know about the existence of whatever ghost fixed the Mary. Which means whatever fixed the ship, it's not tied to the existence of Sky Island. Of all the dials, why did the fart dial have to return? I'm surprised everyone's still standing because that's 4 days worth of meat Luffy farts. The fart dial also accidentally freeing them is straight up hilarious. But it appears the Straw Hats made a fatal mistake by leaving Condoriano behind. It's not that big of a deal. Robin can probably handle herself. She did spend years working for a crocodile after all. Episode 201. I feel kind of bad for Condoriano here, getting left behind by his crewmates to rot in prison. It's just not like Luffy to leave such a valued crew member for dead. I love the old tie yourself up with the real hostage to make it look like you were both taken hostage trick. Works every time. I also love how innocent Dr. Kobato is towards Nami and Chopper. How she's willing to help them even after she finds out they're pirates because they help save lives. She's a very fun character to have around. Unlike the entirety of Unit 55, something about them just, I don't know, I don't like them. I think it's the way they talk mad shit without being able to back it up. This bit where Luffy gets a taste of his own medicine with the extendo punch is pretty funny though. I think my favorite part about the arc so far is that the Marines have to work as a unit in order to combat the Straw Hats. Jonathan isn't an antagonist in the way that he fights Luffy directly, but in that he's organizing these squads kind of like he's the overseer of a StarCraft game. Let's just hope that the Straw Hats don't learn how to Zerg Rush. Episode 202. You know Sanji's a real homie because he wrote down his recipes for the Marines. Oh, it's spicy. I love everyone's different ways to deal with the tear gas. Usopp sharing his goggles, Zoro just closing his eyes, and Luffy just straight up tanking it. The Sinister Chopper is great, but so is Zoro giving him a little round of applause. The whole act they put on is so funny in kind of a cute way. Of course Sanji would fawn over Nurse Nami. That was predictable but funny nonetheless. Condoriano may be gone, but at least Robin kept his sunglasses as a token of their fiery romance. I love Nami's face when she realizes that the gold is missing, and when she screams like someone's murdering her. Oh my gosh. Jonathan lets his guard down around pretty women. Me too, man. Me too. Episode 203. I love scenes like this one in the fog where Nami gets to show off her navigational skills. Her skills are half the reason the Straw Hats are alive at this point, so she deserves all the limelight she gets. I love the montage of the Mary's greatest hits, and by that I mean the times it got hit the hardest. But the lack of Nami stone cold murdering Eric is blatant Warship Island erasure and the only part of it that I laughed at too. I'm definitely happy that they're going to be spending the money to fix up the Mary and get a permanent shipwright. If Sea of Thieves has taught me anything, it's that if you don't take care of a ship, it's gonna sink. Cardboard cutout marine galleon is my new favorite version of the Mary. Oh, so stealing pirates' gold is fine, but using their recipes is where the Marines draw a principled stance. I see how it is. Personally, I think the real treasure was the food we found along the way. Episode 204. Why do they always leave poor Chopper to watch the ship on his own? Let my little man stay out of danger for once. It just dawned on me the reason that Jonathan puts so much emphasis on eating your full plate is because his wife is the head chef. And you know what? I can respect that. I don't know what Condoriano is planning, but it can't be good. This has gotta be the most dangerous safe in the history of safes. Why would it fall? Are we sure Luffy ate the gum fruit and not the Buster fruit? Because that's a classic Buster Keaton gag, and I love it. I'll be honest, I completely forgot about Nami leaving her waiver behind. This is why Usopp is such a valued crew member. I'll never not laugh at the gag of Luffy accidentally hitting one of his crewmates. That's always funny. I think my favorite little joke this episode, though, is Luffy sleeping in the barrel as a callback to the first episode. It's little details like that that make this show great. Episode 205. Oh, hey, look, it's the bluefin elephant tuna from Logtown. I see now. Condoriano has been going undercover in the Marines for years to help the Straw Hats escape this one instance. He's truly such a dedicated crewmate. Who the hell designs a cannon like this? His finger is on the trigger. That thing is designed to shoot backwards. The Straw Hats fought well for their treasure, but unfortunately for them, Jonathan is the master baiter and they're his prey. I do like how he lumped in their gold with all of his fishing trophies, and how Luffy has the decency to only bundle up their gold and none of his. I love this scene of the Mary triumphantly escaping her marine facade. It's reflective of how the Straw Hats are on the verge of escaping the Marines themselves, but also I laughed when the fake galleon crashed into the real one. What can I say? I'm a sucker for slapstick. Episode 206. This shot goes hard. There's a whole lot of payoff for foreshadowing this episode. Luffy having the octopus and the flame dial on him were both foreshadowed while Sanji and him were in the kitchen. The shallow reef has been foreshadowed since Robin went undercover and noticed that there were certain times no ships could enter or leave. Not to mention it's Vice Admiral Jonathan's final net, and Major Shepard getting slugged was foreshadowed by him being a massive prick. Jonathan also mentions that someone from Marine HQ, an admiral named Akainu, has taken a great interest in the Straw Hats, which itself seems like foreshadowing. Granted, this is a filler arc. I love how all the sinister glares everyone gives are just contrasted by Chopper's cute, adorable face. Boy, am I glad that they're gonna get the Mary fixed, because that's not just a hole, that's a whole ass extra door. But to think, without Condoriano's quick thinking, the Straw Hats would be toast. Everyone say thanks Condoriano in the comments. I think the most notable thing about the G8 arc, as was pointed out by so many commenters on the shorts, it's the single most praised anime original arc and one of the only ones that are considered to be up to par with the story adapted from the manga. Every other filler arc so far has come with an idea and the stigma that it's lesser, but so far I've only actively disliked Warship Island, and even then that was the first one where growing pains are to be expected. G8 was certainly better than Goat Island and Ruluka Island, but it doesn't mean that those two were all bad. As for the merits of G8 itself, the arc manages to set itself apart from every preceding arc, both canon and filler, by setting the Straw Hats up against something they've never had to face before. Someone intelligent. That intelligence makes Vice Admiral Jonathan not just an intriguing antagonist, but also a rather formidable one. But at the same time, that intelligence is also why he loses, something that I love from a writing perspective. The Straw Hats are simply too unpredictable to approach with any form of logic. At every twist and turn, they outlook and outdumb Jonathan's strategies through the power of teamwork, making for an incredibly solid and very good arc. No new devil fruits were introduced in the arc, and I feel like I got my thoughts out pretty well during the actual shorts, so I will leave you with the knowledge that Condoriano's English VA was the VA of Charles Entertainment Cheese from 1993 up until 2012. Farewell. All good things must come to an end, but unfortunately so must this video. Since I've squeezed out so many thoughts and opinions this time around, I think now is a good time to address the psychic elephant in the room. So let's answer the question, what the hell is with all these correct predictions? I think the answer is very simple. I honest to God just stumble headfirst into predictions while making jokes. Like, Usopp dying next arc. But a fair amount of things I intentionally try to predict are really just due to me paying attention to small details or drawing thematic connections. I also feel like it's important to draw a distinction between what I consider to be a prediction and what people comment on as predictions. Without context, usually those comments leave me confused most of the time. Sometimes two events will be described with the same verbiage, or a character will start shouting the central theme of the entire series during the middle of Jaya, and it's pretty easy to draw those connections, especially because I do my best to take notes. I should have grabbed my notebook for this. I didn't. It's over there. I'm too lazy
crazy to get up. After reading the SBS, I know that not every small detail is intentional, but a lot of those details are there for a reason. I think it's also important to disclaim, I am incredibly lucky. Not so extraordinary that I can use that power for anything useful, but as an example, I literally won parts of the audio equipment I'm using to record this in a Yamaha giveaway at TwitchCon last year. By the way, I'm going to be at TwitchCon 2024 if anyone wants to grab a selfie. This is genuinely my first time watching the series, so if anything happens where you think, there's no fucking way, I promise you, there's yes fucking way. As always, I'd like to go out on a list of my favorites. Favorite new character? Pierre. Funny horsebird, make me go haha. Favorite arc? Noland and Kalguro's wacky weekend on Jaya. I know this one isn't technically an arc of its own, but I'm counting it because I enjoyed it a lot. Favorite scene? It's the face. I don't need to explain this. What else could it be? Favorite new ability? Montera. It feels like a cheat code, and I'm still 80% sure Zoro's gonna figure out how to use it at some point. Favorite weird concept that just kind of works? Dials. I was gonna say island clouds, but then I realized that there are dials that can create island clouds, so dials count for both. I just love all the different variations and all the different ways to utilize them. That's all I've got for this time, but if you want more, you can subscribe to the channel to get notified for when I release the next one of these big videos covering the Water 7 saga. And if you aren't patient, there's already plenty of shorts because I am a little late on this video, waiting for you to watch right here on my channel's Shorts tab, as well as multiple dedicated videos on the early One Piece movies that I've been redoing my coverage of.